thank you for finding time for this afternoon. And thanks to Nick and the team from Echo for doing this. It's our first Teachers in Residence that we've done in this way. The ones that we've done so far have been in person. I think this is going to work, but thank you for trialing it with us, and we'll see as we go. What we're trying to do, the Teachers in Residence we put in place, and I'm not quite sure of all of your backgrounds. I know some of them, but quite a lot of teachers said if they'd come the traditional route where they'd come from school to university and then back to school, then when the student turned around and asked that difficult question, Miss, Sir, what's it like to work in a design studio? What's it like to work in engineering? Whatever it might be. You can talk from what you've read and what you've heard, but you haven't got that first-hand experience. And what we were trying to do with Teachers in Residence was present that first-hand experience, so you had a bit of it. Now, you're not going to get, on the 3-day, which is what we've done mostly, you're not going to get it completely. But if we look at the last one, which was at Bulletproof, which was with Michael's school, I know that the person that came on that really got a full 360 of what went on there, and went away back to school. And I loved the tweet when she got back to school, which was, this is the first time that students walk into a studio and not a classroom. And that was on her first morning back, which I absolutely loved. So it is part of our Blueprint initiative, and we are delighted to have Echo in as partners with that. And really, I'm just going to hand over, because I want to go through the whole process with you today, just to assess how it works and work out how we might adapt this in the future. But thank you for finding the time, because I know it's tricky to do on any afternoon. Friday afternoons, probably, you know, I know when I used to do timetable, everybody wanted that last lesson off on a Friday and nobody could have it. It was only 1 or 2 people could have it. So Nick, I will hand over to you. Nick is the founder of Echo, and over to you, Nick, and I'll step back.
Well, if it's all right, I'll step in first.
Sorry, I didn't know you.
No, don't worry at all. I just wanted to sneak in and give a little overview of sort of the plan of the afternoon before I pass on to Nick. So first of all, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us. We're really excited to be able to share with you our experiences of working in a design agency and the sort of the different journeys that we've taken to get to where we are today. So we've sort of decided to order this session to follow a bit of a day in the life of our design process, from receiving a brief from the client to seeing it on shelf, for example. So the plan for the day, this is a little overview of our design process in a very, very simplified form. It's not quite as black and white as this, but without giving out too much away from each of my colleagues who will share their roles with you in a bit more detail. We've got our client service team who are in close contact with all stages of the design process. And you'll hear from Nick and Danny about what that means. We've then got our strategy team who kick off the beginning of a project, and they look at insights and research to help provoke and conceptual ideas. So Tashi and I will talk to you a bit more about this. Then we move into design, and that's where we bring to life the strategy in a visual way. And myself and Claire will share our experience from a sort of graphic design 2D point of view. And Andy will talk more about the sort of the 3D side of design at Echo. And then finally, Scott will share with you his insights into production and how we get from the great idea to a piece of packaging you can hold in your hand. So that's it in a nutshell. I'll pass over to Nick to kick things off.
Fantastic. Thank you, Susie. Actually, Danny, are you driving the deck?
I am. So
okay.
Just give me a second. Let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? No.
See you.
1 second.
Okay.
Nick.
Thank you. So I'm Nick, the first of many people you'll meet today. I'll just introduce myself first of all, and very briefly, and I'm going to come back to my story in a second. But what I'd like to do first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for putting this stuff together at Echo. Everyone's really enjoyed putting this together, and we're really pleased to be talking to you guys and sharing our experiences and our world of design, and particularly Susie, who's organised the whole thing, and she's done a marvellous job. I thought I'd kick off actually just talking about the industry first of all. Because I know when you're at school, as a student, you're trying to think, where's your career going to go? And, you know, everyone thinks about the obvious things of, you know, maybe becoming an accountant or an engineer or working civil service or even working in a shop. It doesn't matter. It's like there's a lot of understanding about those sort of industries. Design has always been a bit of a mystery. And isn't it just coloring in? Isn't it just, you know, it's not really worth anything. It's, you know, it's a bit lightweight, is the kind of responses you sometimes get, but it's so not. I mean, it's so the opposite of that. I mean, the design economy adds 85.5 billion to our economy every year in the UK, which is a huge amount of income. And there are 1.69 million people employed in the design industry. So it's not small. It makes an awful lot of cash for the business and great careers for people. And there are many different sorts of agencies out there and places you can work. We as I was mentioning earlier, we belong to what's called the Design Business Association, and they represent the design industry and design companies, and they've got over 350 design consultancies on their books. And they're spread all over the country. They, you know, from the West Country out to tip of Scotland, and an awful lot in London. London is a centre for design, lots of colleges there. And the sort of companies that you can go and work to as a designer is so diverse. I mean, traditionally there's been lots of the big groups out there. It's like WPP, which owns a lot of advertising agencies like Ogilvy. They're vast. They have over 1,000 people working for them, and they generate over £12 billion a year. So they're huge, absolutely huge. But what we've seen over the last probably 20 years is a proliferation of smaller agencies. You know, everything from one-man bands up to 2 or 3 people. It's made possible now because you don't necessarily need to have an office or a studio even anymore. You can do it out of your bedroom. You know, and within that space, Echo is around 20 people. So we're a sort of, I suppose, a small to medium sized agency, and we turn over about £2.5 million. And as I say, we employ around 20 people, and that's quite typical. There's lots of agencies out there. And of course, the thing with design is, not only is, you know, it generate lots of revenue for the world, it's also extremely interesting. It touches on so many different worlds. You know, here at Echo, we've got both 2D and 3D design in its kind of simplest form. But what does that mean? I mean, 2D is identity design. So it's, you know, what does a company or a brand or a product look like? You know, what's its logo look like? You know, what colors does it have? What's its tone of voice? All sorts of things like that. We do packaging design. You know, to everything in a supermarket, designer had to design in there, and you just realize, oh my God, that's an awful lot of work when you see it. Every company has a logo, has a corporate design. That all needs to be done. Communications, everything you see on social media, you know, Instagram, on TV, it's all been designed. Point of sale in shops, interiors of shops, everything's designed. So you can touch every single industry in every different part of the world. And what designers are doing, really, I think, is I sort of boil it right down to, actually, it's connecting stuff, technology, essentially, even if it's in its simplest form, things with people. And it always has a brief. The difference is that we're doing it commercially. It's something someone needs. So it is a business, and it's commercially viable. I thought it'd be worth, actually, we're going to talk about ourselves and our company, but I've just picked 3 very famous designers out there to just talk a little bit about their journeys, because I think it's quite interesting that there is no set journey from being a school person to going through and becoming a designer. So let's take, for example, Vivian Westwood. Everyone's heard of her, very famous fashion designer. She had no formal training in design. She did start doing a jewelry course, but gave up. And her breakthrough was actually making clothes for Malcolm McLaren, who had this famous shop called Sex on the King's Road, which was kind of the epicenter of the punk world back in the 70s. And she's just gone on from there, and she's now worth 185 million pounds from those sort of humble beginnings. You've probably heard of Johnny Ives, who works for Apple. He's actually one of the most successful product designers in the world. He started out, he went to Newcastle, did a degree in product design, and then actually worked for a friend of mine's design agency. There were about 5 or 6 people. They were connected into Apple out in California, and they did a little project for them, and they nabbed Johnny. He moved over there, and he's now worth 700 million pounds. 700 million pounds. So you can be very wealthy. Designers take different paths as well. I mean, if you take, we've all again heard of James Dyson. He went to the RCA, the Royal College of Art, and did product design and engineering there. And in fact, he ran the course there for a number of years. He really started out quite humbly. He came up with this idea for a wheelbarrow that had a circular ball instead of a wheel, so it could go over all sorts of different terrains. Tried to sell that for years, didn't make any money. Then came up with the idea of putting that ball into a vacuum cleaner. He spent 5 years and made 5,000 prototypes to get to the first vacuum cleaner, and then it took him 10 years to actually get that into production and be successful. So you have to admire his perseverance. He's, whether you could call him a designer now or just a successful entrepreneur, I don't know, but he's now worth nearly $10 billion as a business. So it's big stuff. You can do it in little scale and you can do it in big scale. So how do you do it? Where do you go, and how do you sort of learn about all these things? Well, there are so many design courses out there. There's probably there's well over 100 that you can go to that cover all sorts of different disciplines and so forth. If you actually, one of the best ways of learning more about what the courses are and what they offer, and that you could go to and your students could go to, is New Designers at the British Design Centre in Islington in London. It's a fabulous way of just getting a complete picture of what the design world is like. They have over 3,000 students exhibiting from over 100 different design courses. So you can go there and you can meet the students, you can see their work, you can see all the different types of courses there. They run it over 2 sessions. They have week 1 is in June, and then the other one is just in July, I think. So look that up, because I highly recommend going there. It's a great way to learn about what's available, and it's very exciting, I think, for students to go to as well, because they can speak to people that have actually done it. They can see their work and they can think, I could do that. So yeah, so hopefully that's given you a bit of a snapshot of the world out there. I think there are so many different forms of design consultancy out there. I'm going to tell you my story and then talk a little bit about Echo, and what Echo is just one example of that. So and Susie, wave at me if I go on too long, won't you? So what my background really is, that I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was at school. I had no clue that design was even a job or something you could go into. My father was actually worked for a bank, but he initially started out doing an engineering course and said, why don't you do engineering, because you quite like fixing things. So off we went to see which engineering course I could get in, and I just happened across a course called Engineering Product Design, which is at South Bank Polytechnic, as it was then. It's now a university, and it was started by a guy called Bill Bond, who realized that he was an engineer, and he had a unit at St Mary's Hospital where what they were trying to do was design machines or mechanics for people with disabilities, so prosthetic arms and things like that. And what he found was all the engineers he had didn't seem to understand how to design things for people, how to design mechanical things for people. They just didn't have that empathy. And he realized that what it was is their training. They didn't have this understanding of the sort of human side of design as well as the technical side of design. So he set up this course to do that, and that really appealed to me. So off I trundled to this course. I didn't quite know what I was going to end up being at the other end of it, but the course itself was fascinating. So I came out of there with a not very good degree. I have to say, I only got a 2-2, but I was inspired at that point to become a product designer, because I'd found out about that through my sort of experiences there, and a friend of mine had got a job in a company called Pentagram, a very famous design company, and he was telling me all about it and what he did there, and I thought, that's what I want to do. It was really my first exposure to design, really, other than engineering. So off I went, and trying to get a job as a design engineer in a design company, so that I could sort of get myself into the industry. And that's what I managed to do with a company called Mogridge Associates. And they said, fine, you come in, you can be an engineer, but we'll help train you as a product designer. And I did that for many years. I went out to work in Silicon Valley. They became a company called IDEO, and IDEO, and Bill, who started it, is famous for designing the first ever laptop. And Dave Kelly, his partner out there, and another guy called Mike Nuttall designed the first ever mouse. And so they were right at the very start of the whole the computer world and the computer industry. And I was very fortunate enough to sort of do engineering and do design, but eventually I sort of segued right over into the design world, and I did all sorts of things, from designing computers and telephones. My telephones are all enormous because I designed them back in the 80s, so they had huge batteries attached to them, so they're rather embarrassing to show. But I was fortunate enough actually to work for Royal Mail, and I designed their post boxes. So if you go to the airport, into supermarkets, you'll see my post boxes there, and they're still there, which is rather nice after many, many years. Halfway through my career, I decided that I wanted to change, and I was fascinated by marketing and branding. I was designing things, and when I saw them being marketed by a lot of the technology companies I was working for, I just didn't think they were getting across what I thought was in the design. They didn't seem to be able to talk about it very well. And it was the branding. The branding was poor. I always do this thing, is if you put your finger over the logo on your laptop, would you even know who made it? It's apart from Apple, pretty much everyone else is kind of very bland in terms of branding. So I jumped ship, went from that world of technology and durable products into the world of consumer goods, and learned to design brands for consumer goods companies like Unilever and Nestle and people like that. After working for about 3 different agencies in London, JKR, Blue Marlin, and Coley Porter Bell, I started to think that actually I wanted to get in touch with the product design side again and just join everything together. So we set up Echo nearly 18 years ago now. It's scary to think of it, but 18 years ago, we set up Echo really to think about both design and innovation. So design of brands and innovation of product, and doing them together, because in our view, the end consumer, the user, doesn't see a separation. It's one continuous thing to them. So we felt that we ought to design it like that. So that's really the starting point of Echo, and Echo's been that ever since. We've always had 2D designers, 3D designers here, and you're going to meet some of them later. We've always done innovation as well as design. So that's sort of, if you like, early design, and we take things through to market. We can do that. You're going to hear from Scott around a production side on the graphics, and you'll hear from Andy around how we help with the engineering to get 3D things into the market. So it's going from that sort of thinking, the strategy at the front end, all the way into the marketplace. So it's incredibly exciting and interesting and very fulfilling, because you get to see what you work on in the market. People buy it, and they can tell you about it. It's amazing. Many jobs you just don't see your output, it's invisible, but ours is on full display. So it means you put 100% of your emotion into things, but it's a very exciting place to work and a place to be. I don't know whether I've got any other slides on there. Oh, there I am. So what do I do? Well, I'm fortunate that I can still work on design and strategy and innovation, and I really love doing that. I love rolling my sleeves up and getting involved with brands, with clients, and helping them solve their problems. One of the things that I'm absolutely passionate about is sustainability. I would say to people, it was designers that got us into this mess. We made, the disposable pen fashionable and convenient, like the Bic. We invented the white t-shirt that you throw away after a couple of washes. We made the disposable economy appealing and usable and convenient. So it's our job, I believe, particularly as we design a lot of packaging, to actually create a more sustainable world, a more circular world. So I get involved a lot on that. And what's also really exciting, and it's very frustrating when you want to change the world as an individual, it's very difficult to do that. But as individuals here at Echo and in other companies, we get to work with people like Unilever. And if we can help Unilever change the way they behave, even by a tiny percentage, the knock-on effect around the world is huge. And we've been working on and are working on some really exciting projects with companies like Unilever, where we're just, helping them move into sustainable materials, using different, moving into durables and things like that, where we can change the world. So a little flick of our pen and that has ramifications in a very positive way everywhere. So I get involved with that, helping companies with strategy and so forth. I'm often normally pre-COVID and hopefully soon traveling a lot. We do a lot of our work is international. We're working with big global companies, as I say. So I spend a lot of time traveling, talking about design, talking about Echo and what we do. And I'm also the managing director. So even though I've got my training is in engineering design, I now run the company. So I know a lot about business, the management accounts, etc. I have to understand all about that and the legal side and employment and all those other things. So I'm pretty busy on many different different fronts. That's probably enough about me.
All right. Sure, hard to top that. Hi, I'm Danny. I'm an account manager at Echo. So just to start off, so I grew up in South Africa. When I left school, I took a gap year to figure out what I wanted to do. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I took a gap year and I came to London. And I worked as a waitress, a receptionist, events assistant, you name it, I did it. And then I decided that I wanted to go into marketing and communications. So I went back home to study. And I studied a Bachelor of Arts in Corporate Communications and absolutely loved it. And while I was studying, I was doing an internship working in the events department at my university. So I was working while I was studying, which was great because I got experience. And then once I finished studying and I got my degree, I went to work for a small digital marketing agency as a junior project manager. So that was my first job out of university, and I really enjoyed the project management side of things. I did a bit of project management as well as account management, and then I moved on to a beauty company, working as a junior brand manager, which was super interesting. So they designed all the products for a bunch of body washes and face cleansers and things for a store called Clicks, which is South African equivalent to like a Boots. So we did everything in-house. It was the branding, the product design, and that was lovely. And then I moved over to London. And I started working with Echo as an account manager. And it's been so exciting. I think being an account manager with a design agency it's forever changing, forever new things, super exciting. You get to work with really big brands, and your work that you do with your team is seen in stores, which is so rewarding. And you also get to have sneak peeks behind the scenes of things that are about to be launched, work on products from the get-go. So yeah, that is me. So day in the life. So at the moment, because of COVID, we're 3 days in, 2 days out. So this is my setup at home. It's where I am right now. But it's great to be in with the team most of all, because we get to collaborate a lot. But then the balance of working from home, I get to have my head down to tackle admin, get on top of finance, do a lot of planning for weeks ahead and writing up proposals and things like that. So what is account management? So I've kind of broken it down just to keep this short and sweet. For me, I would describe it as being a relationship manager. So within a business, you're going to be creating relationships with clients. You're going to be nurturing those. You're going to be maintaining those, and basically becoming best friends with all the clients, as well as being a project manager. That's also quite a big part of it, because you're going to be working with the design team. So you're going to be taking briefs from clients and taking them to the design teams, and then managing it from there on to deliver for the client. So it's very exciting in that you get to work with both clients as well as the design team. I would say that it's also, you have to be an organized person and a planner, which is lovely as well. I found that so exciting. There's nothing more rewarding than having all your ducks in a row. So that's part of it. And then also being in the creative industry is it makes the planning side of things a lot more exciting. And then I would say that you're a representative for the company, because you're going to be constantly conversing with clients and things. So their relationship with you does kind of echo the company that you're working with. And that would be what an account manager is. And then I wanted to talk around having a mentor. So I think that I know for sure when I first came into the industry, when I first started studying, and when I thought about going into corporate, I thought it was quite terrifying to have, this big bad boss. And there's that whole stereotype around it about having, a boss and how awful they can be. But really what I have found is that they're your mentors, and within the design agency, it's so amazing to work with so many different people that you're learning from all the time. I'm not necessarily a designer, but I'm learning from them every single day. I'm not a production manager, but I'm learning from them every single day. So you're getting to experience all the different departments, and you might find one day, hey, I really like that, I want to go into that, and you can do that. All these different people in these different departments become your mentor. Your boss is your mentor. She's helping you through everything, she or he. So I found that within the industry, it's been really eye-opening to work with so many different people and understand what they do on a day-to-day basis. It also helps you expand your knowledge. Those people become your friends when you're having a stressful day. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. And then going on to communication. So being an account manager, it's a massive part of your job, because you're constantly going to be talking with clients, going to be talking with your design team. So if you're someone who loves other people and loves talking to people, loves having coffees with friends, this is just perfect for you, because it's just day in and day out, you're grabbing a coffee, you're sitting, whether it's in front of your screen or you're in the office, and you're having a coffee with someone and chatting about, what they're hoping to do and how you can help with that. So I find that quite rewarding, and I find it, it's exciting, and I love people. I love meeting new people, and that is what I'm doing constantly. Then a bit into like a few specifics that you do within your role. So emailing is a big part of your job. It's a massive form of communication besides from face to face and phone calls. So it's emailing back and forth with clients, design teams, and then as well as briefings. So receiving briefings from clients, so they can come to you with an idea of what they want to do, what they want to design, and then it's taking their brief and turning into something appropriate to brief into your designers. So that's also another big part of the role. And then as well as sign-offs, so these all connect to each other. So it's once we've done what the brief required us to do, it's about looking at that and thinking, have I answered everything that the clients asked me to do? So at the end of the day, it's going to be you who's then delivering and deciding if what we're sending is ready to go. So those are just the little bits of day-to-day things. And then creating relationships. So as I touched on before, this is creating relationships internally and externally. So having a great relationship with the design team and your designers is so beneficial, because you are working together every single day, and things can get super stressful, but things can also be super exciting when you're briefing in an exciting project, due to an exciting design piece for a big brand. And then obviously your external relationships, so ensuring that you have those trustworthy, honest relationships with your clients, but also those relationships with your clients where you can have human moments and you can just have a meeting to catch up on how they're doing, grab a cup of coffee, check in on how they're doing in their personal lives. And so that's a big part of things. And then again, as I touched on previously, briefing and project processes are a big part of what you're doing, and it's about becoming a queen of admin, keeping on track of everything, checking everyone's doing okay, checking everyone has everything that they need. It's a crucial part of the job to ensure that the design team is comfortable and knows what they're doing, and their creativity can flow, as well as ensuring that you're following processes with clients and things to ensure that they're comfortable and that they trust you to take on their project. And then the last thing, which is not very fun, but time management, which is so important. So every project that you do has a deadline. So it's super important as a client account manager to be able to ensure that you're meeting those timings and expectations, and guiding your team to deliver those. And that's the gist of what account managers do. And I think it's so important to mention that often, most of the times within your client's day, their most exciting part of their day is getting to see the design work. So it's always a happy call. It's always, an exciting part of their day to see what you've brought to life from their ideas. So it's super rewarding. And that is me.
I forgot to do one of my chores, which was not chores, my tasks, which was to show you around our studio. I'm not sure how this is going to work, because I'm just going to walk around with my laptop and unplug it first, because that would be dangerous. And just to give you a taste of what a London design studio looks like. One caveat is, because we're working flexibly and it's a Friday, there's no one here. Well, there's a few people, but there's not many. If we did this a month later on, I think we'd have a lot more people in, but it gives you a feel for what we are as a business. So I'm just going to walk around. I'm not hoping you'll be able to see stuff there. So there you've got Susie sitting there. And this is our entrance. We're on the top floor of a building in Hatton Garden, where all the diamonds are, and we've got lots of our work on display there, from going right back to things at the beginning of our business, like EcoSure, which was a sustainable paint, to lots of hair cream and all sorts of things in there. The Rexona one there you might see later on. That's one of our first designs. So yeah, so this is design studio. We've got lots of sound insulation just being put in because we do lots of video stuff. There's Nye over there. I think you're speaking to him later. And this is our main meeting room. We've just got it set up with video conferencing facilities in here, so we can do lots of remote working. We've been running workshops with companies all over the world. We did a workshop with some pasta people in Italy, and we've never actually met them in person, did a whole project online. This is where Scott, our production guy, sits. You can speak to him later on. So we have lots of really sort of high-end printers here to so we can do copy proof of all our designs and make sure they look right. Normal photocopying machines here. Here's our kitchen, a little lounge area, some flowers, all looks nice. And another meeting room. There's Scott in his room waving at you. I don't think I need to show you the loos. And then I'm going to take you upstairs without falling over, hopefully. And this is further design stuff up here, but we've just to show the reality of a design studio is it can be messy. But what's interesting here is we've got some other kit down the end here. So we've got different bits of kit here. So this is actually and Andy can talk to you a bit more about it, but it's a way of making quick prototypes. So this is actually builds up the design in builds up the design on a platen there using molten glue, and this one here is actually a multi-axis sort of milling machine that cuts it out. And we often use I don't know if we've got any foam lying around, can't see any, but we actually no. Oh yeah. So this is the sort of stuff that we're actually using. It's like a kind of, you know, a hard, dense foam that we can actually machine up. So we can build prototypes really quickly. Yeah, that's a quick view of Echo. Back to you, Susie.
Thanks, Nick. I thought it might be useful to sort of break things up as we go. So if there are any questions at this point for the client service team, we're more than happy to answer them.
If anybody wants to put questions in the chat box, or if you'd like to unmute yourself, and we can field the questions over.
And I think we are slightly ahead of schedule, so we were going to do a little break, but I think perhaps we move on to strategy and pop a little break in after that. If Nye and Tashi, you'd like to have the floor?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks.
And I think I might sneak in one more case study then if we've got the time. So, but take it away, Nye.
Okay, cool. Nice. Hi guys, nice to meet you all. I think I'm gonna just share my screen and just sort of check that you can see. All up?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, my name is Nye. I'm a strategist here at Echo. I'm the sort of latest addition to the team, if you like. I just joined in January. I'm going to take you through my very unorthodox career path, because strategy itself is kind of a bit of an unusual career. It doesn't have any academic path into it. Almost slightly more obscure than design in many ways. And so this is my career. I call it a sort of career in phases. And it's interesting that Nick mentioned that design is all about colouring in, because my background actually started in geography, and my partner tells me all the time that it was basically just colouring in. And so when I became a designer shortly afterwards, she thought that was amazing. So actually, just going back to my school days, after college, I didn't really know what it was that I wanted, but I knew I liked geography, and the climate was important to me. I felt really interested in it, and decided to pursue that through university. So I went to Aberystwyth to study environmental science, which was sort of a hybrid degree focused around geography, chemistry, physics, and biology. So through that, it was quite kind of a versatile degree. It was very heavily on data analysis and research. I was very fortunate to have the chance to study in Norway for 6 months, and got to specialize for a small piece of time on Arctic hydrology, which is basically just the study of ice, how ice moves and how ice melts. In 2012, I graduated. I wasn't sure again what it was that I wanted to do. I kind of went to geography because it gives you a good all-round sort of skill set, but I didn't find that my career path sort of became apparent while I was at the university. If anything, I was more obscure than it was when I went in. But I was interested in marketing, and I did decide to explore what type of career that would be if I took up that field. So I was lucky enough to get an internship in an art center, particularly around data. Strangely enough, it was very much focused around audience development, but I was on the side getting into design. I was a photographer, so I was trying to teach myself how to use Photoshop, and through that, I actually started to pick up some design skills, some basic design skills, and started doing some in-house designs for mostly advertisements for digital ad and newspaper ads for upcoming shows and events that were going on in the region. And it was through that I became project coordinator and did a little bit for Regional British Film Institute. It was like a season for a couple of months. I decided that marketing was interesting, but not quite for me. It had some bits I really liked, some bits I really didn't like, but I was sort of taken with graphic design as a potential career path. So I wanted to explore that a bit further. That sort of led me into digital engagement. It was more of a comms, sort of digital comms type of role. We did websites, social media, photography, video, and some graphic design work. I was quite taken with design. I thought this is definitely a career path for me, but without any degree, without any real experience in it, it was very difficult to get into an agency environment, even though that's what I decided that I wanted to do. So after my contract ended at the digital engagement, I became self-employed. I started freelancing, mostly as a photographer, but started doing some design work on the side, picking up anything that I could, saying yes to everything, which was, not very financially rewarding, but a great breadth of experience. Over time, that started picking up, and I dropped photography and started taking design more seriously, focused on brand identity and website design predominantly. And I was a designer for a good few years before I started to have a problem with, or not have a problem, but I started to feel like the work that I was creating didn't really have a purpose behind it. That what I was creating was great, but what was it achieving? And that's where I started to think a bit more strategically and started to explore the idea of strategy and the purpose behind it. And after a couple of years of sort of doing that, the design work started to fall back, and the strategy started to become more prominent. And I was working for sort of small companies, regional companies. I did some big multinationals, mostly around hospitality. Was my sort of area of expertise. But after sort of thinking about the pandemic sort of hit, after thinking quite long and hard about, what it was I wanted to do, how I wanted to evolve and shape my business, I started thinking that, I got into this self-employed because I wanted to build up my experience, build up my expertise so that I can move into an agency. An agency was always part of my career plan. And I thought, well, this might be an interesting time to explore that potential. And it just so happened that I was approached by a recruiter pretty much at that exact time. And that's where my career in agency started with Wink. So Wink were the sister company of Monocle magazine, who are sort of luxury, sort of fashion lifestyle magazine. And it was there that I got the sense of what pure strategy, what I call, is, which is very, very research heavy, brand strategy, top level sort of thinking, and then very heavily involved in communications. And it was quite siloed, so there was no connection, but so much between the strategy and the design, which was actually part of the reason that, you know, I felt like it didn't quite connect with me in that way. The original idea that I came to strategy was this idea that the design work that I was creating didn't have a purpose, and the strategy was the component that fit that purpose. So with Wink, I got a great sense of the strategy. I missed that element of design that was the reason I got into it in the first place. But I had a huge amount of experience doing all sorts of different things. At Wink, I got to experience of different industries: luxury fashion, retail, real estate, finance, in sort of really sort of high-end ways of building luxury brands for, you know, aspirational audiences, as I put there. And it was sort of at that time that began the year, and joined Echo here, doing, you know, much more involvement with design, much more interwoven strategy and design, and, you know, getting involved in consumer goods, and particularly around sustainability, which takes me back straight down to the beginning of my career path in academia. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what what a strategist is, because I think there's a lot of words that we could use to associate with what we do, but for me, a strategist is a clarifier. Businesses come to us with a goal in mind, but how they achieve that goal is often unclear. They need someone from the outside who's able to tell them the truth about their company, their competitors, the consumer, market, and all the broader context in which they operate. So businesses need strategists to provide clarity. And brands struggle to articulate what makes them special. They get hung up on superficial things. They get hung up on what we call hygiene, which is basically the sort of standard benefits and values that are ubiquitous across the competitive landscape. So sustainability, for example, that might be the new industrial revolution, let's say. But what does it mean for your brand? So if it's a value, if sustainability is a value for your brand today, how long before it becomes the hygiene of tomorrow? How does a brand like Patagonia, for example, who has this heritage with environmentalism, this sort of green heritage, how long before a brand like that, how does a brand like that change to adapt in 10 years' time and to avoid the encroachment of a market? How does it differentiate itself to a market that needs to be greener? Now, these are the types of challenges that we need to consider when we deal with strategy. And it's in finding ways to navigate these challenges and the opportunities that we uncover along the way that we're able to provide clarity and a direction for the brand that helps them not only achieve their goals, but also closes the gap in the perception between how the brand sees themselves and how consumers see the brand. So how do you become a strategist? Well, as I said, there's no real straight entry point into strategy. And as I said, my path is sort of built up in stages. And the design field is typically very direct, but quite stratified. So you have junior designer, midweight, senior art director, senior art director, design director, creative director, and many other small steps in between, depending on the agency that you're involved with. Strategy, by comparison, is quite different. It's a very sort of senior starting role, but it's very compact once you get here. So there's only strategist, senior strategist, and strategy director once you get into this path. So there's no direct academic route, but there are a lot of ways of getting into strategy. You could be a marketer, you could be a business consultant, account manager, designer. There's lots of entry points. And depending on your background, you might have different types of strategy that you'll be drawn to. So if you're a big top level thinker, then maybe it's brand strategy. If you're a great writer, then maybe it's communication strategy. If you're a designer, maybe creative strategy is definitely a natural fit for you. But there's also UX, there's experiential, there's retail. There's lots of different types of strategies you can either specialize in or you can be a generalist. So you might have noticed that I didn't say there's a junior strategist because they don't really exist, which is why there's all these other types of entry points. So there's lots of responsibility on a strategist, which is why the role typically starts quite senior. And at brand strategy level, what we're doing is we're putting in place a direction for the brand that's going to last anywhere between 5 and 15 years. This not only has long-term consequences, but brands also trust us to make the correct analysis for them. But whenever you put in all the strategy you're building needs to be executed. It needs to be expressed in some way in order to actually manifest itself in the world. And that can be taken through business decisions. It can be created through copy, or it can be expressed through actual design. And this is where we take on more supporting role and hand over to the design team, or in this case, Tashi.
Thank you, Nai. Oh, sorry, it's because you're still there, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm going to share screens in just a second. So I get to work alongside Nai. As he said, one of our newest recruits. We're very excited that he joined the team just around Christmas time. And then we sit alongside Nick in our virtual office. And I've been lucky enough to work at Echo for the past 5 years, came on board around sort of a midweight strategist and have worked my way up to being a director here. And excited to share a little bit about my journey up until that point, and then a few case studies which will help explain, what on earth do we do in strategy? What is a day in the life like? So, Nai, if you might need to come off sharing if there's a way to.
Oops. Yeah, sorry. Hold on.
Sorry, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have issues on my side.
Yeah, I'm struggling to leave the share. There we are. It's because my my monitor bar is behaving. There we are. Sorry.
Perfect. Let me see if this works. Is that showing up? No. Actually, if I do my entire screen, will it accept that? You're looking at yourselves? No. Please grant browser access. Oh, I need to choose. Actually, Nai, do you mind running the slides off? Because you've got mine there, don't you? Sorry, after I've rudely kicked you off. And while that's loading, so a little bit about a day in the life. So as a strategist, Nai and I would roughly split our day into thirds. So we'd spend a third of our day usually on the phone or in person with clients, receiving the brief, digging into their latest commercial challenges and really understanding the job to be done. The next third of our day would be spent actually doing the job, so researching, getting a really good understanding of the consumer, the market context, any sort of cultural insights we can glean, and actually just sitting around doing a lot of thinking, doing a lot of debating within the team, and presenting back to clients what we're recommending they do, And then the last third would be about briefing the team and working in collaboration with the designers. So different agencies have different cultures, but ours is very much, everyone all lumps into the same room and we thrash things out. Whereas other agencies, there's a bit more formality and distance between different disciplines. So the strategist might actually never sit in a design briefing. They produce a document that gets passed on, and it's people like Danny as an account manager who will be the thread through the project. And so I think onto the next page, and you'll see similar to Nye, I've had a bit of a squiggly career path. And I remember one of the best bits of advice I received from one of my high school teachers was, don't worry too much about if you feel like you're making eclectic study or career moves. And she explained that, one day when you stop and look back, you'll understand that all of those were stepping stones to get to where you are today. And I think that's very true of my experience. So I actually started out intending to be a physiotherapist. And whilst I didn't complete that course and I realized it wasn't my calling, what I have taken away from it that helps me in my job today is things like an understanding of ergonomics. So if we think about particularly packaging design, making sure that things, people can interact with them comfortably, whether they're a little bit older and might have dexterity challenges, and increasingly with design for inclusivity on the agenda, there's learnings that I've been able to carry forward from that. The other part of that was about behavioral psychology, so helping nudge people's healthier habits. So thinking about, what's a nutritious diet look like to keep you in tip-top condition, or how do you encourage people to actually do their exercises and heal themselves. And so that's something that we can apply across to more permissible products. For instance, if we're stripping sugar out of chocolate and trying to make that an attractive offer, or if we're trying to nudge more sustainable habits with buying into new sustainable packaging alternatives. So then I changed tune and decided, actually, I've always loved maths. That's my calling. I'm going to head back to uni and I'm going to study commerce. And that led me to a summer internship at Ernst & Young in the audit team. So looking back now, what I have been able to take away from that is a really sort of solid grounding in commercial reality. So looking at the cold hard numbers, how do businesses make money and stay profitable? And I was on the books to start there as a graduate, but I ended up in my final semester of uni starting at a brand planning agency in Melbourne, and absolutely fell in love with it, realized these were my people, and it was a much more stimulating environment than working in accounting for me. But what was lovely is it was a crash course in human psychology. So we did lots of market research. You went around, and I was sitting at someone's kitchen bench who is a professional poodle groomer one day, and then the next day you're talking to someone who loves speedboats, and just growing this very eclectic general knowledge. Then after 3 years of that, I decided I still hadn't quite found my niche. So I pulled the ripcord, went on a round the world trip, and hoped to have an epiphany on what my big aspiration in life was. And that didn't quite happen in a dramatic sense, but I kept coming back to this gnawing feeling that wouldn't it be nice to actually take these strategies, these great ideas that we're having, and actually put them into practice. So at the lab where I worked at, we would brief into a separate design agency or an advertising agency, and they would execute the idea, bring it to life. And I was so curious to be on the other side of that and actually see things through to completion. So I took myself back to study at Shillington College. I know that they've popped up in the UK and America and beyond. That is a fantastic option. So for me, that was this intense 3-month conversion to study graphic design. And then I came away from that, was still a bit restless, and thought I was going to take those graphic design skills into an events and activation agency. And this was the chance to sort of help bring things to life in 3D. And I got to work with Lavazza there and do the Australian Open, etc. But what I realized is that in events, you're very much on the periphery of branding. So much has already been decided and set in stone in terms of a brand's aesthetic and the way it speaks and looks and talks. So when I plucked up the courage to move to London and found my way to the doors here at Echo, this was a chance for me to actually, come to the epicenter of branding. There's London and New York, you could say the same of, is really where all the big, exciting decisions are made. So it felt fantastic to be here in those boardroom meetings where, those big global decisions are laid down. So that is a little bit about me. And I think what is most helpful is to show now a little bit of our work in practice. And, oh, sorry, yes. And so to echo what Nai was saying there, one way we can also describe a strategist is a mediator. So your job is to sit between the client's best interests and the consumer's, as we are to use that word, but the individual, whoever they want to sell to. What is actually going to motivate them? What do they care about? What are their pressure points in life? What are their aspirations? How is a brand actually going to offer value to them and encourage people to open their wallet? And then meantime, the client's ambitions are to grow their revenue. It's to build their reputation, which essentially it's largely commercial. A reputation today means further sales tomorrow. And so following on from that thought, we wanted to share a case study we've done recently with Kleenex that helps show how we can as we sort of reconcile those two different parties' best interests so that there's a mutual outcome. So we got to work with Kleenex on, and there was a few different strands to this actually. Now, if you come back for 1 second, so if I top line the brief that we received, there were several different challenges we needed to solve. So one was about recognizing, we all know and love Kleenex. They've got, real brand love and great loyalty, especially with older generations. But they were now looking to reorient the brand and refresh it with younger consumers. So job one. Job two, we're increasingly living in a digital age. So yes, we need to come up with a wonderful new design for the humble tissue box and make sure it stands out on shelf. But we also need to make sure that that design idea has legs in the digital realm. And so we can activate it across social media, the website, etc. And then the third point there was about simply acknowledging tissues are a very commoditized category for a lot of people, and particularly amongst younger shoppers. They can't see the reason why you would trade up for, across from Sainsbury's or Tesco's. A tissue is a tissue. So how do we address that and put forward a compelling reason why, and help people understand that Kleenex actually, if you get down to the molecular fibers of it, is a far better tissue and it's much kinder to your nose. But then on to the next slide, the fundamental challenge was quite simply, there hasn't been a cold and flu season in 2 years now because of COVID. So it's very hard to make a profit in tissues when, the main occasion, the main consumer need has been eradicated almost overnight. So what I'm going to do now is show you how we can use something called the nested strategy template to help build out a solution. So this is where we start to square the brand's objective and the consumer's problem. So teeing it off, we're going to run through what was the business challenge, and then separate to this, and there's going to be no relation to start with, what is the consumer problem? And within that, what is the consumer insight? What's that real aha moment? What's that interesting observation that we could help use as the crux of a strategy and a design solution? Laddering down to, what do we need, what's the job to get done so that the consumers can achieve their goals, so that we help the businesses to achieve their goal. So on to the next one, and here we go. So Kleenex business problem here, tissue sales have dived during the pandemic as lockdowns have prevented the cold and flu season. Separate to that, over here we've got consumers, and we realized that actually almost 20% of British adults during this extremely challenging time of the pandemic have been suffering from a form of depression. And so it's interesting, if we stop and reflect, Kleenex, they're nearly 100 years old. They've got great love and trust in the realm of family hygiene in a very sort of practical sense. But actually, could we be doing something a bit more emotive and providing a more holistic solution? So the insight here was that despite this mental health crisis that we're recognising on a national scale, the national agenda is focused solely on physical well-being. So we decided the job to be done here was to let people know that Kleenex is invested in the nation's mental health. And to that end, what we did was struck up a partnership between Kleenex and Mind, the mental health charity, so that for every box sold, a donation was made towards their helpline so that people could reach out and get the counselling that they needed. And this is so that British adults feel like Kleenex cares about their headspace. Which is helping to position Kleenex as a more caring brand of tissue that has a place in the home, regardless of that acute cold and flu season. So it was about making this tissue box be seen as a sort of a totem of well-being. And you'll see in the next slide that there was this beautiful design to activate this. So everything through to the copy on the pack there, these almost haiku-esque poems, which are about noticing the simple pleasures in life. It was about promoting everyday mindfulness by having these little touchstones in the house. And then visually, as you can see, you've got these beautiful gradient patterns that the team worked on, and they were taking inspiration from color therapy. So it's almost this visually therapeutic experience in the home. And what's fantastic is this has been a huge success. What we are always striving for at Echo and any other agency is design effectiveness. So obviously we want to make sure that this is a commercial success as well as a social one. And we were able to achieve some great results in this instance. Kleenex have since donated sales exceeding 100,000, which has helped fund over 25,000 calls to their helpline. They were able to achieve their annual sales target for the first year within the first quarter alone. They were also able to drive really strong retailer engagement. As you can imagine, tissues usually get squeezed off the shelves during your summer and spring, but they were able to hold their space throughout the year. And we were also able to bring on board over 260,000 new shoppers. So an all-round success. And I think we will take some questions.
I have a question. It's not necessarily linked to what you just said, but for those of you that have spoken about your career paths, do you ever sort of regret that you haven't got into design earlier on, or do you feel that what you've done prior to where you are now has helped you with where you are now?
I'd love to answer that because it's a really good question that I've often thought about. Would it have been better if I'd, rather than doing engineering, gone straight off and become a product designer? But the fact is, I think whatever experience you have, it sort of adds to the type of designer you are. So because I did engineering, I see design slightly differently from someone who has done it purely as a product design course. So in the end, I am what I am today because of that journey, and I would not change it for a moment. It was kind of, you know, it was very exploratory. We went through lots of different places, but it sort of makes everybody, not just me, but everybody unique through that journey. And my kids have just graduated and getting their first jobs, and I know, talking to them about their careers, they were so worried about making the absolute right decision right at the right time to go into whatever it was, that they had to get it right first time. And I kept saying to them, just take a step, you know, because you'll learn from that step, and that step will take you on a journey, and it will change and change and change and change. And you're on, most people end up on a kind of a curving path rather than a straight line. So I think it's really important not to worry about that sort of stuff too much. Yeah, we have, I mean, I have to say, interestingly, the ones you just heard from have had quite complex paths to get to where we are today. You'll probably hear some more stories today which are more direct.
Yeah, I just want to add that I completely agree with that. Nick's answer there, and you are a summary of your experiences. So it's not necessarily that all the things that you've done. It's not that you've not been able to go straight into the career that you wanted, but the journey along the way has built the different experiences that have created the type of person that you are, and they all add something. So in my case, with the background in research and analysis was sort of a really good foundational bedrock, as well as just general experience in around managing a lot of different types of fields of expertise in terms of geography, in terms of chemistry or whatever. And then the background leading from marketing into design gives me that sort of broader context, and then the actual practical skills of being able to do the work itself and then relate to the designers that I work with. I know that the strategy that I create has to make sense to them and has to be communicated to them. All these little things I kind of feel like are building blocks, and everyone has their own building blocks, and that gives you a unique take and perspective, and that's the sort of value that you add as an individual.
Also to add, I think, so I couldn't make my mind up if I wanted to do the planning side, or the actual design and implementation. And I think honestly, if I had done the design course sooner, I might well have gone down that track. But it was a very practical decision. I just moved to London soon after doing the course, didn't really have any work experience to my name in design, but did have 3 years of strategy. I would have had to start at the absolute bottom of the heap, and London is full of hotshot designers. So I started with, I went back into what I know. But yeah, who knows? Maybe I would have followed a different path if I'd perceived design as an option from uni days, from high school days.
Can I ask one? How often does a big company come to you with sustainability as their driver? I'm thinking of Unilever now as an example. I can't use one of their products anymore because it's got a little hook on a shower gel that's supposed to hang in the shower, and it doesn't work. and that plastic is the wrong plastic, and it's just too soft, and it doesn't hold properly. And every time I look at that product, I just think, because the hook comes away from the bottle, if you design the hook properly once, you only need one of those in your life, and you could actually cut out millions of tons of plastic. Now, you can make a big impact with a small change. Is that drive coming from the companies, or do you drive it the other way around?
It's coming from everywhere. You know, it's coming from investors. You know, with ESG ratings, companies have got to perform on that side of things. It's coming from employees. Every company we work for, every employee in that company wants to do something about the company they're working for. It comes from us trying to persuade them. It comes from the consumer, changing their attitudes. Sustainability is now part of, like as with you, part of your decision-making process. It's coming from the retailers. In fact, most of the pressure is coming from the retailers, because it's really easy for them to do it, because all they have to do is go, right, you know, we're going to become completely sustainable, and they don't have to do anything. It's all the people that supply their products to them have to do all the hard work. So it's very easy for them to put that pressure on, and then eventually there'll be legislation. But and there is legislation coming left, right, and centre. So it's coming from absolutely everywhere, and so therefore every brief we get will have some element of sustainability, in the same way as you know, you're talking about a piece of plastic design, Andy will talk about this later, but it's you know, it's good for the company if they can do something which uses less material. It's more cost effective for them, but it's also lowers carbon footprint, you know, lowers the amount of material going into, you know, into the system. Although there is other solutions, which is having more plastic and more durable, which is you're saying you have a circular system. But yeah, it's everywhere and everything, and we're very focused on that. So you know, if you go to our website, you'll see that we talk about it a lot. So we're getting people coming to us now specifically for pure sustainability work.
Yeah, I have a question. It's to Nick. You showed us around your design studio there. It's really lovely. And I just wondered, what do you think the future of work and design? I mean, some of your employers there mentioned flexible working. Some are working 3 days at home, 2 days in the office. And you just said yourself that you don't need an office, you can work from your bedroom. And just wondered, with the COVID thing that we've just been through, How do you see that for the future in design?
Well, it's fascinating actually, because from about 20 years ago, I did a project on the future of the office for a big furniture company called Steelcase. And some of the ideas we were talking about 20 years ago have suddenly happened, and it took a pandemic for them to happen. And it was interesting that when we entered the pandemic, we didn't realize that everything was already set up. You know, we have the technology to be able to work remotely, through Zoom or Teams and things like that. And we have the laptops that are able to sort of cope with that. I mean, if this had happened 20 years ago, we would have had the ideas, but we wouldn't have the tech. So the tech has allowed us to work remotely, and we had a pretty good year actually. We found that our designers could be briefed and go off and do their design work in their own homes, and then we could come together in sessions like this to learn. However, what you miss out on is collaboration. Human beings are collaborative, a collaborative species. I was just reading this article about Neanderthals and humans and why humans are more successful, and it was our ability to collaborate and come together and work together. And I think working remotely misses certain things, and so actually we're getting everyone back into the office now. As I said, one of the things we're now doing is we're saying, we want everyone in 3 days a week. That you can come in late, you can stay early, whatever you want to do to avoid the rush hour, but we want you in the office, in the studio, because we want to collaborate. And it's good for young people, because the young people that come into the business need to work with the senior people, so that they learn, and they learn all those soft things that you don't even realize you're teaching them or sharing with them, but just by being together. And I think also you learn about, when you're working remotely, only your piece of work. And the thing is, the studio has multiple things happening all the time. So, in the studio, you get to see everybody else's work. So what we're trying to get to a point is you use the best tool for the job. So when coming into the office is the studio is a hub for where people come together and collaborate. And then when you want to go and work quietly, so, I have to write articles and things like that, I can go back home, sit in my little, top room and get on and write my article, and other designers can be sort of working on their design works in isolation, and then when they're ready, they can come back together again. So we're trying to figure out what's the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Well, that might time us quite nicely if there's no more questions for a little 10-minute break to get a cup of tea, coffee, water, loo, stretch your legs. And then we can regroup at 3:30.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
I find it really interesting that you've all wandered around to get to the roles that you're in now. And it's at school, we tend to make it look like a straight line, don't we? That
yeah, exactly.
You do that exam, and you end up there. And as we know, it's not that easy.
Well, I suppose that's the thing. School is linear, isn't it, in that respect, and so you're preconditioned to think the rest of your life is going to be linear, but as a student, but actually in reality it's often opposite.
Puts a lot of pressure on kids, though. There's a lot of kids, the fact that they don't know what they're going to do with the rest of their life at 16, 17 or whatever. They get quite stressed by it.
Yeah.
God,
I know, both of mine did.
I'm still working it out.
I think it's a common thread between all of us, and everyone so far has said they weren't sure exactly what they wanted to do when they're at school. And you might see a little bit more of that going forward.
I was about to say, I'm about to do the complete opposite, so let me go for it. I'll share my screen and kick things off with 2D design, graphic design. So I'm Susie, and I'm a senior designer here at Echo, and I'm just going to take you right back to where my love of design started. And I've always been creative. I've loved drawing and painting and making things. I was obsessed with Art Attack on TV, doing anything tactile, and I was convinced that I was going to become an artist, a fine artist, you know, the physical making of something. Yeah, that tactility, it really resonated with me. And also, like, computers weren't really a thing when I was at school. I know it's hard to believe by my youthful appearance, but that didn't kick in for quite some time. So yeah, graphic design wasn't really a word that I would come across for many, many years. I was good at geography and I loved maths. And when we got to the point in secondary school where we were sort of considering career paths, my school was really trying to promote an academic path for me. And I had to stick to my guns quite strongly on this, that I was determined to find a creative path for my career. So I did a foundation diploma in art after my A-levels, which at the time was very much the norm if you plan to study a creative subject at uni. I'm not really sure if that is still the norm, because I know that a lot of foundation courses were shutting around the time that I was in uni. But yeah, this was a fab opportunity to explore creative subjects in more detail that we didn't get a chance to do at school in such depth. So did a whole wide range of stuff. You know, there was still like the physical makings of art in there. There was the fine art, the sculpture, the screen printing. Loosely tried a hand at animation, but again, that was stop motion. So that was drawing by hand still. I hung on to my analog passions as long as possible. Textiles and illustration and graphic design. And even in graphic design, this was pretty analog. We spent a lot of time typesetting on letterpresses, and screen printing became part of that for me as well. And I think that physical connection to graphic design is why I'm sort of now a packaging and branding designer. And then sort of thinking back to those subjects that I was good at school, I found this balance between the left and the right side of my brain with graphic design. Maths promoted problem solving skills. You know, answering a design brief is all about problem solving. Human geography really fascinated me. What makes people tick? Why do they do what they do and react to certain things in certain ways? Back at school, we studied conflict in the Middle East, and you know, whilst that was quite a heavy topic, I found it absolutely fascinating, and that really sort of sparked an interest in human behaviour that I didn't fully understand until I started working in a design agency, how that sort of feeds into strategy. And I've got a real love with working with the strategy team, I think because of that sort of side of my brain. So yeah, so all of these things combined together to, you know, the sweet spot really was graphic design for me. So I went on to university to study graphic design in more depth, and I graduated, hooray! And then I started internships. So this is probably going to be like the most linear journey from school to where I am now, because I always knew that I wanted that creative dream for a job. And it was when I was doing internships that I decided to really take advantage of this time in my career where, you know, on a CV, if you hop around month to month to different places, companies might start questioning that. But with an internship, that's your one opportunity to really do that. And okay, I might have gone to a slight extreme there. 11 internships in 13 months was hardcore and it was exhausting. But I really wanted to use this almost like a sort of another foundation year to find out exactly what kind of company I wanted to work at, because there's so many out there in so many different types of design as well. You know, like different personalities to companies, different size companies, ones that are more digital or more packaging or more editorial. So I used this as my opportunity to really sort of hone down what I wanted. And I got hired, thank goodness. I started off in a large studio. I worked out that I wanted to do packaging and branding, so I ticked that box. And this was a really wonderful experience to learn stuff that just, as Nick was saying, when you're in the studio and you're with other people, there's things that you just pick up on that are, you know, you just learn by osmosis. And there's so much that you can learn through school, but then there's like a whole nother sort of realm of learnings that you just absorb as you go. And I learned a lot from being in a large studio. But after sort of 2.5, 3 years, I decided that I'd had a bit of enough of a large studio and I wanted to go the other way and work in a smaller one. I think it's sort of, it's a personality thing as much as anything. I was always a much quieter person at school, and I love having those more personal relationships with people, and which is what I can get from a smaller studio. So that's why I moved to Echo. And yeah, I think what I've really loved about working here is knowing everyone from, you know, intern to managing director Nick on a personal level, and having those personal connections. And the way that we all work together. So when I introduced at the very beginning, and I sort of bucketed us into client service, strategy, design, and production, you know, it's really not that black and white. It's very fluid. We're all talking to each other all the time at all different points in the design process. And it's a lovely thing to do in a smaller studio. So yeah, so first and foremost, I'm a senior designer here. And that means I'm really involved in the creative work on projects. So I might be working with younger designers and mentoring them, or I might do some solo projects as the main designer, you know, working directly with my director and creative director. I also get to present to clients. And as I said before, I work closely with strategy because I'm really passionate about that side of my job as well. But then also because, you know, I had that long-winded experience of internships, I've sort of developed a soft spot for those coming into this world. You know, it's, as many of us have said, it's a bit of a confusing world to go into. There's so many different paths that you can take. So yeah, so I started managing our interns and education program, which is how we're here today to talk to you. And yeah, really grateful for you all being here and being able to share this with you. So thank you. I think that's me. Yeah, I'll pass over to Claire now.
Thank you, Susie. Let's try and share my screen, which I've not done. I've done so many times in the last couple of years, but you never know. Hopefully you can all see that. Brilliant. So hi, I'm Claire. I am a senior designer as well at Echo. For someone who wears a lot of black clothing, I actually love really colourful designs. I've always enjoyed, since starting my design career, packaging and branding. That is something that I fell into, but I'll get probably a little bit more into that later. But yeah, how did I get here? So I just realised I'm showing this to a lot of teachers. Don't tell me off for not having my top button done up. Had a go at me for this, because she was also a teacher at my school. But yeah, I've always felt very creative. From a young age, I love music and drama. I played the violin, piano, sang, theatre groups, all of it. But there was something about art that I really enjoyed. And I always did quite well at school, with like generally, but also particularly with art. And I never really quite understood why I managed to get the top grades when I was definitely not the best at drawing, or the best at painting, or the best at making. And I realise now that this probably was a very early indication that I should be a graphic designer, because what I did is I got the mark scheme, read the mark scheme, figured out what I needed to do, and then did it. And so yeah, always did quite well, never figured it out. But as I went through school, and as I left school and went to sixth form college, I wasn't really sure quite which way to go. Like I said, I had the music side, I loved the drama, but also I loved history and biology, and there was just so much choice, but nothing felt like it fitted until I went to sixth form college, and they just started a new photography course. So I signed up to that as actually my fourth option. And actually it's what I turned out to love the most, and the one I enjoyed the most. I was really fascinated by these like black and white, amazing, very graphic photographers, but still I'd never heard of graphic design. And it wasn't until my photography tutor had looked at the work that I liked and the work that I was producing and said, have you thought about doing graphic design? And this was a bit of a revelation to me, never heard of it before. So I started doing some digging, which was quite tricky, because the internet was a new thing. So I was kind of buying books and asking around and, you know, trying to find someone who knew anything about it. I then went on to do a foundation diploma in art and design, similar to Susie. But in this year, I specialised in graphic design quite quickly, because it just all kind of clicked into place once I did a bit of reading and a bit of research into what graphic design was, and realised that I saw it as very much art with a brief. The freedom of fine art I always found really intimidating, but actually having something, you know, a goal in sight, I always found much easier to comprehend. I'd have to say I didn't absolutely love this, so I knew that going on to university was going to be a really important step for me. Again, a lot of asking around, reading articles in papers and getting the prospectus books, and asking for advice from different tutors led me to choosing Falmouth University to do my degree. They have a real emphasis on design thinking and big ideas, which again kind of makes me understand why I love kind of working at Echo and the with the strategy team. And yeah, like I say, chose Falmouth because of this, and they had a great reputation and an even better beach. And I graduated from Falmouth with a BA Honours in Graphic Design. So still quite linear. And then I get to London. Another reason why I chose to study by the coast is I knew I'd probably end up going to London to work, because I knew that this is where there would be most of the work. I think this is slightly changing now, but still the majority is happening here. And I think one of the things to point out was I graduated in the recession. I was very lucky because it was a difficult time to start out. I had parents and friends who could, you know, I could stay on people's sofas and floors. When I was interning there, they weren't often paid, which is luckily changing and is different now. So you have to be able to support yourself at that point. And same as Susie, did quite a few internships, not quite as many as 13, or was it 11? But I did a few, and luckily one of them, after about 10 months, one of them led to a job. And that was my very first design job. So my CV looks a little bit like this. So I started off as a junior designer at a place called Coley Portobello. From doing my internships, this was one of the ones that I was at, and they kept extending it until they had an opening for a junior designer. And something really clicked when I went there. One, they had a strategy team, and two, the packaging, which is something I hadn't really considered before. There are lots of different disciplines within graphic design. It's not just what we do. There's, you know, branding, corporate branding. There's digital, user experience, product experience, print. There's lots of different things. And yeah, going to this first job, I realized how much I loved this packaging side and the tactility of it. And I was there for about 4 years, and it was such a steep learning curve, huge learning curve, from having left university, where, you know, I was there ruminating over these ideas for weeks at a time, to coming up with that idea in an afternoon. So yeah, big learning curve. Then my second job was at a really large company called Future Brand, and I was there for about 4 years, almost 4 years. And I started off as a middleweight, moved up to senior, and this was a huge learning curve because I was and kind of a bit of a roller coaster, because I was working with environmental designers, a really large strategy team, and I was just learning about so many different things each day, and it was very fast paced and very intense. And after that, I realized that I had not done what Susie had done and tried lots of different places. And so I made a really difficult decision in 2017 to step away from that career path that I had at my last job, and go freelance, which really opened up the world around me in London, meaning that I could just try lots of different places, get a real feel, try different projects, different clients, meet a lot of different people. And very, very fortunately, one of the places that I started freelancing with was Echo. And again, it was one of those, it just felt right, and very luckily they liked me to join. So I did join in 2020, I think a week before lockdown. So I've been mainly remote working with Echo for the last couple of years. So very excited to start getting back into the studio. So a day in the life of a designer it could be anything. There are so many different things in your day. But for example, our mornings we have a stand up with our team and the client service team. Things like I'll be reviewing as a senior designer other people's work, but also having my designs reviewed as well. So I might be working with a small team overseeing another designer, or I might be working on my own. Things like presentations to clients. I might be helping plan time with the client service team, or I might be working with Scott, our production manager, and handing over artwork. So we will take our designs to a certain stage, but Scott has the expertise and the knowledge to kind of get it ready to get out into the world and actually make sure that it prints and the best representation of our work is out there on shelf. And then in the afternoon, again, it could look like anything, but a lot of my time is probably spent developing work or coming up with concepts. And with that, I'll be working really closely with strategy, for example, especially if it's a new project, one that we're just kicking off and we're looking for territories and concepts. But we also do things, like every job, like timesheets, checking in with team members, having check-ins, making sure everyone is okay and that everything's ticking over. And we always have an end of day catch up as well. So a little bit more varied, and I'm just going to try and stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
So I'll share a case study with you that it's a sort of a good all-rounder for what we've just covered, really. It has a strategy up front. We've got lovely design sort of realized in the middle, and then I think Scott will touch on this case study later on from a production point of view as well. So English tea shop. So this is a Sri Lankan British business, and all their tea is grown and produced in Sri Lanka, but they trade with I think it's around 55 countries, and their design, so this is the previous design, and it had been around for about 10 years. They had lots and lots of different tea products because their products were created on independent market needs. So there wasn't a whole lot of unity between the designs and their customers. So those are the people who are, those are like the shops who are buying the teas. They were saying that there wasn't enough sort of storytelling, telling people what English Tea Shop was about. There was no sort of central theme. So we worked with English Tea Shop to uncover basically what made them unique. What's the thing that they offer that no one else can, that would mean that people would want to buy their teas. And that is their farm to cup business. So they don't follow the norms of buying tea through auctions. They've got their own farmers and their own supply chains. And that means that they're in sort of complete control to make their business fairer. So that's better for the farmers, there's better pay conditions, they get treated more fairly, and that's quite unique. And they're also organic, which they didn't talk much about before, I believe, either. So then sort of our question to sort of figure out the puzzle and problem solve is, how do we tell customers and consumers, so the people who end up drinking the tea, why they should buy this tea? And we started with this idea of celebration. So Sri Lanka is really vibrant. It's vibrant in colours and aromas, and also vibrant in this idea of community too. So, you know, the farms, the sourcing of the tea, the relationship that English Tea Shop has with their farmers was really important. But not only that, but drinking tea as well. So, you know, drinking tea can either be a solo activity or it's quite a community-based one as well, the thinking about it from the sort of consumer point of view. And with that insight, we built a brand. And in the last sort of the 10 years before with the previous design, there were some elements that had become quite iconic, mainly the teapot and the bright colours. So we looked at making the teapot more intrinsic to the identity. So it becomes the actual symbol of the brand. And we sort of dressed it accordingly with the illustrations here of the man and the woman, which really puts equality at the heart of the brand. And you know, it's not just about picking the tea, but it's about nurturing it too. You know, it's that real sort of community aspect at the heart of the brand here. And then we created this anchor of ingredients, these natural ingredients, which always sit with the teapot. So, you know, storytelling is really important for building this brand up and really sort of celebrating the uniqueness of the brand. Yeah, as we sort of developed the design of the packs, we wanted to communicate the heritage of the brand. And English Tea Shop wanted to show the ingredients in a more sort of unexpected way, you know, not just standard photography. So we created what we called the Flavor Mandala. So, you know, the mandala is a symbol common in India. It's got this sort of sense of community and celebration in it already. So we sort of created this celebration of flavor bursting from the pack. And we used it with the bright colors that the consumer's already familiar with. That's how they navigate the different flavors, but we modernized it a bit to really make the illustrations sing. And they've got a number of different ranges, and this is the core range, the pure teas. So you can see how we sort of we kept the heart of the idea there, and really created sort of unique illustrations and designs for each of the flavors on the packs. And then they have this this wellness range as well. And they had some existing product names here, but we created a sort of variation on that core mandala. There's more sort of delicate details and interwoven illustrations to really show that this is a blend of tea with other ingredients against this sort of more natural color palette to suit the wellness range. And then a new addition to their portfolio was this sort of super goodness range, which focused more on fruit and vegetable ingredients, kind of like a booster drink, you know, with good sort of nutrients in it. And we used this really rich earthy color palette. And again, we created a slightly different mandala shape to give that sense of strength from the ingredients. And we worked with a really fantastic illustrator on this project to bring our vision to life. And I think this is a really important point for becoming a designer, that you don't have to be the best at every skill, but communicating the vision in your head is sort of the most important thing to getting the right people with the right skills on that project. You know, we're a team and we make great work together, not individually. And I see a lot of interns coming out into the world with the weight of the world on their shoulders, because they're trying to do everything themselves. So I thought that the other reason that this would be a good project to share with you is to show you what teamwork can create together. So from strategy to design to bringing on board this really skilled illustrator. And I guess, you know, the other sort of point that I want to end on here is that everyone that I work with is creative, and it doesn't matter if you don't have designer in your job title. You know, we've all got creative input into the projects that we work on. So I hope that today sort of shows you that breadth of careers that can come from a job in the creative industry. Thank you. Any questions?
Is mine working? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay, you never quite know, do you? So I guess my question, I've got a few questions. So Susie, you mentioned about presenting. What's the most sort of common way that you would present? Is it the classic you're in a boardroom kind of thing? What is the setup, or is it mainly online?
I mean, it used to be 100% in person. You know, pre-pandemic, we would either do it in the studio or we would go and visit the client. Sometimes that's quite nice because you get a much bigger picture of what their business is and who they are as people as well. When I was at uni, we were thrown into the deep end with presenting in front of like the whole year group, and I remember that we were asked to stand there with sheets of tracing paper, because tracing paper makes a lot of noise when it rattles, and all of us little nervous first years, you know, shaking the paper, wobbly voices, and yeah, I hated it. And it was just through doing it a lot more that you get used to doing it. And I think I've been very lucky that clients I've presented in front of have been very almost like nurturing themselves. You know, I think we're all human at the end of the day, and people recognize that, to be honest, probably no one particularly enjoys presenting that much most of the time. So usually people are very understanding towards a younger designer when you are presenting. And I think it's pros and cons of doing it online versus in person. I think in person it's much easier to sort of get that sense of how someone's reacting to what you're presenting to them. But I guess also, you know, there's certain pros of doing it online as well. You know, there's a bit of a sort of safety blanket there in some respects, but I do prefer presenting in person.
Cool. And in terms of design work and creating design work, I'm just thinking about my A-level class at the moment. I've got such a range. I've got my students that love sort of designing on CAD, and they'll use SketchUp and SolidWorks and things like that. Then I've got the other side, the more sort of illustration, and they like using paper. What kind of software do you use in industry, and what would be good for us to be able to equip our students with?
So from a sort of graphic design 2D point of view, it all mostly happens with Adobe. So Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign. But to be honest, when I'm looking through people's portfolios when they're applying for internships, the thing that matters most is your conceptual thinking, because you can learn a skill. You know, you're not expected to join a company knowing everything. And sometimes we see on CVs, people put little sort of percentages of how skilled they are at things. And I just think technology evolves so quickly, we're never going to be 100%. You know, we talk to each other in the studio all the time asking for, you know, is there a quicker way that I can do this? Or there must be a way that I can do that. Does anybody know? So we're always learning. And I think, yeah, it's great to have a sort of starting point with that software, of course. But yeah, the ideas in your head and how you can sort of imagine them coming to life is the important part.
Just to build on what Susie's saying, the ability to draw is it cannot be overrated enough. And I totally agree with what Susie said. You can learn the software, but the amount of people we see who jump straight onto a computer program without having a great idea, or the ability to kind of communicate that through literally a biro on the back of a fag packet or a napkin, it's incredible, and they will never be a substitute for having that brilliant thought and that ability to put pen to paper. So yeah, just draw some more, keep practicing.
Yeah, part of me worries with a coursework, there are elements you've got to demonstrate CAD, and I have got those girls that are too sort of CAD heavy. I love all the kind of creative, and they almost get they sort of have a bit of a block on it, and sort of that committing, whereas they can just sort of, I mean, I'm sat on my iPad now making notes, but I can just erase it really easily. So they just sort of struggle with that. So that's interesting. Okay, cool, thank you.
You're welcome.
Because actually we didn't use a lot of technology at my uni. The first year they encouraged us not to use computers, and we built up sketchbooks, and because it was much more about the thinking. And just to give an example of that, like in my first ever job, I was doing a project with a very senior designer, and I went to the review with my creative director. I had a sketch on a bit of paper, and she had all these like beautifully macked up, almost finished looking designs, and I was so scared. And actually it was my design that was chosen, and it was a sketch on a bit of paper. So it's just showed that it's not just a thing for students, it's actually what you take into your career as well.
So even if they were going to like their universities and interviews and things like that, so it's good to show that kind of range, would you say then? Sort of
absolutely. And I think to build on what Claire was saying about, you know, the polished item versus a sketch, something that I don't see enough of, and I always advise to put into portfolios, is your messy sketchbook. There are some universities that are like, you know, design your portfolio to perfection. But to be honest, that's just like the end point of the journey in design. Seeing the sketchbook is like your brain on a piece of paper. It's really seeing how do you process information? How do you work through ideas? You know, it's sometimes sort of finding out an idea that didn't go anywhere. Why didn't it go anywhere? You know, what were the hurdles you had to jump through to sort of figure that out? Those are almost far more interesting than the end product a lot of times. Yeah. So you can never undervalue, is that the right word? Yeah. The importance of the sort of the doing stage, be it schoolwork or you know, working on a live project. That's so important to knowing how you work as a person.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree what Susie's saying. It's like, we tell stories. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for that thought process. And it's weirdly very like maths, where you might get you know, 90% of the marks are given for showing the equation, the process, and you only get 10% for getting the right answer. We want to see how people think and how they work through those challenges and problems. And I think, you know, from experience to my kind of university interviews and things, a good interviewer will pick apart your portfolio and they'll look straight past the CAD, because everybody's got that to the thinking that sits behind it. So yeah, I definitely tell stories.
Cool.
Any other questions?
I think just on that, just quickly on the CAD thing, I think, you know, when it's depending on what you're doing with the school kids on their course, if you're trying to sort of get them to see what they're interested in, then, you know, doing a bit of everything's important. So doing a bit of CAD, doing a bit of sketchbook stuff is important, because they might go, oh, actually, I really like that detailed thing. And design is, I mean, the guys are talking about conceptual design here, where you don't want CAD to get in the way of your thinking. So you want it to go from your brain to a pencil or pen, because that's the most immediate way of getting your head thought onto the paper. But then design is also about detail, and Scott's going to talk to you about production and getting, you know, just getting that color absolutely right, or positioning that bit of, if you look at typography, it does start with people drawing, but then it starts to get into what's that tiny little radius in there, and that the changing that radius from 0.1 to 0.2 or something just suddenly changes the whole look and feel of it. So I think, and some people are more oriented towards that, and other people are more conceptual. So I think, you know, at school, I suppose you're really trying to find that out as a student, aren't you? Where's my interests lie? So I think it's trying to make, I would sort of be saying, try and make each part of it as fun as it can be, and don't feel you actually have to join it up always. You know, have a project which is purely about CAD or purely about sketching, so that you can really focus into it, or divide it up, because it's they all have value really. But I wouldn't worry too much about what the software is, or, you know, what you're doing. It's more about the thinking that's going into it and the type of thinking, because as you say, you'll probably learn a whole load of new softwares, you know, within 5 minutes anyway, because it all changes all the time. So you know, I think it's yeah, useful to do.
It was interesting when we had Foster's delivering to a group of teachers in a very similar context, where they said they discouraged their designers from going to CAD too early, because they said it's far more difficult to pull back from a CAD design than it is a sketch on a piece of paper. And they found that they think they're saving an awful lot of money through just holding them back that little bit before they're allowed to commit to CAD.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, the skill of drawing is not to be a beautiful drawer. If you see some of my drawings, you'd be quite shocked. Andy, on the other hand, does really lovely drawings. But it's the idea is that you can get your idea across. You only have to do enough that everyone goes, oh yeah, I get it. I know what you're doing. And that's not very much effort, not very much time. And then you can analyze your idea and decide whether it's worth carrying on. If you've put loads of work into it and it's a rubbish idea or not as good as another idea, then you just, all that time's a waste of time. So it's important to, you know, efficiency of design is really important. We're not artists, we're designers, so we're working to a timeline, we're working to a budget, so we've got to get to those ideas, same as Foster's, got to get to the ideas as quick as possible and be able to decide which ones we want to invest more time and effort into. So we'll start with 100 ideas and we'll come down to 4 or 5 and then eventually end up being 1. So there's no point in putting lots of effort into those 100. You just need to be able to contrast and compare them to get them down to the 6 or whatever that you take forward.
Post-it note ideas. If you can put it on a post-it note and explain it clearly, you're probably onto a winner.
Yeah.
And how long would so if you were working on a packaging product, how long would that normally take? Is that a month kind of project or shorter?
How long's a piece of string? We've got one project we've been working on for about 3 years. They still haven't managed to get anything out. Others, you know, get turned around quite quickly. It's often not down to us. It's down to it's actually often down to decision making. So we could turn a whole, you know, like concept stage around in a few days if we had to, but normally it's a few weeks. You then go to development and then you go and, you know, you go down that line, but through that process is decision making. So, and that's either the client sort of deciding themselves, and it goes around the business before they decide it, you know, and then it might go to consumers to get them to check, you know, which ones the consumers like, and there'd be different sorts of consumer research in there, and that can take a long time. And then you've got to get into production. So you can draw that process out to be as long as you like, really. But you know, we find with big companies it takes longer. With small startups, they can't afford to hang about. They can get into market quicker, but you often need a year or so to get through that process. And imagine at the other end you've got production. You've got to ramp up production. You're making millions of these things, so that takes quite a time to get that all set up as well. And
from a design point of view, we wouldn't spend like an entire year working solely on one project in graphic design. You know, it might be sort of a week at a time or a couple of days, and chances are you'll be working on sort of, generally speaking, throughout that week, maybe 1 or 2 projects in a row. And I think that's what's really nice is, for me, I get really, I'm not very good when I have to be sort of blinkered down one path for a very long time. So it's nice to have that sort of balance with other projects in the mix. So, you know, you do a bit of time on one, you do a bit of time on the other, and yeah, so it's nice to have a bit of a variety going.
It's actually interesting, depending on different design. So if you're talking about Foster's, whether it's architecture, it is years, you know, and then as Susie's saying, our world, graphic world, can stretch. Packaging takes a bit longer to get out there, but the design itself isn't very long because the process of design isn't long. But then if you get into things like digital, it's almost instant. You know, you're designing and it's up there. So it depends. You probably deciding on how patient you are will probably take you down one particular path of design.
Lovely, thank you.
Well, I wonder if now's a good time to dive into some 3D design, Andy.
Sounds it. Right, let me share my screen. Right, is that working?
Yep.
Fantastic. Right, well, lots of tough acts to follow there, so I'll try and keep this entertaining. Right, hi everyone. Introduce myself properly. I'm Andy. I'm a co-founder of the business alongside Nick, as he was saying at the beginning, back in 2004 when I was 29. So I'll let you do the maths on what that makes me now. And I'm a product designer by training, but my expertise is in structural packaging. And I'll come back to that in a minute. You know, people are thinking, what the bloody hell is that? And I'll talk a little bit more about that after I've kind of given you a little bit of my sort of potted history. And I had an extremely linear path, actually, to get where I am today, unlike the guys at the beginning. And I absolutely knew two things when I was doing my A-levels. I knew I wanted to be a product designer, and I knew I wanted to be my own boss and have my own business. And I guess all of my early kind of career decisions were based on ruthlessly and efficiently getting me to that place. So I was I took roles and things where perhaps it wasn't the best salary being offered, but it was the opportunity that would allow me to kind of build towards that goal. So how do I get where I am today? So sort of 4 stages really in that. So the thing I loved about creativity, kind of were 2 parts to it. I always loved the kind of art, printmaking, drawing, painting, photography, all that kind of side of things. But I love the kind of, if you like, the kind of Blue Peter kind of craft side of things as well. So woodwork, metalwork, getting out the sticky back plastic and just making stuff. And I knew I wanted to have a job that kind of combined those 2 kind of halves to my sort of talents. So and I was kind of at school, I was kind of thinking, well, should I go into architecture? And I did a bit of research on that, and it was like, God, 7 years, no thanks, that sounds like an awfully long time. Sort of to go and do sculpture, but that just felt a little bit kind of open-ended. I wasn't sure. I felt like maybe I needed a little bit kind of more structure. And then my teacher told me about this product design thing, or industrial design, as it's sometimes called, or 3D design. And it really clicked for me that it had both of those kind of elements that I was kind of really passionate and kind of really into. So I made my A-level choices based around what I thought would work really well for that. So I did art, design and technology, and maths. And it is very reflective of, I guess, the sort of 2 halves of my job. One half, which is the kind of creativity, brand, consumer kind of understanding side. And the other bit is the kind of technical, how to kind of get stuff made. And I'll talk in a bit more detail about that in a second. So I kind of trawled the country when it was time to think about potential universities, looking at all these kind of 3D design courses, went up to Newcastle, went down to Bournemouth. And weirdly, I ended up in Coventry, and they have this course called Consumer Product and Transport Design. So a lot of my buddies from university now work for a lot of big car companies. And what really attracted me about that course was that it was a sandwich course. So it meant that my 3rd year, I had to basically go through an interview process with the university helping me, and I got 9 months working out as a designer in industry, and it was the most amazing thing I'd ever done to that point. And I would absolutely thoroughly recommend that it's someone who wants to do a design course, looks for one that has that kind of industry connection, that ability to get out of the classroom and to really experience it. And I learned in those 9 months about 500 million times more than I'd learned in my first 2 years at university. And I went back for my 4th year, a totally sort of different person. Just the level of professionalism, the speed you need to think and work at, just the day-to-day design practices and how a studio kind of operates and how a company operates. And it was just this most wonderful experience. So I did that at a company called Jones Garrard in Leicester. They were at the time, I think, the biggest product design agency in the UK. And they had 3 divisions, and I was working across all of them. So they designed medical products, like inhalers and syringes and things, quite technical stuff. And they did transport design. So we were doing trains, planes, and we did packaging. So I got this amazing kind of opportunity to kind of learn and experience across all of those. And that connection kind of stayed with me all through my final year at university. And when I graduated, they actually offered me a job to come back to work full time. So that sandwich course led directly straight into my first job. So I didn't have to do the kind of the internship kind of route or the kind of exploration and that kind of new introduction to finding a job. They invited me back, and it was just an amazing opportunity and experience as a result of that. And what I kind of learned working there is that it was the branding bit, the packaging side, that really kind of floated my boat, and I developed a real sort of affinity for. I just flip over the page. So yeah, this is kind of the stuff I started working on when I was doing the sandwich element. So we were designing kind of business class aircraft seats for British Airways. We designed the Gatwick Express. It was right at that point where all of the rail companies were kind of being created and the whole thing was being privatized. So everybody wanted their kind of flagship train. So we were doing the interiors, we were designing the front end of the train. It was kind of really kind of fun, very sort of varied work, very sort of technical, but also kind of that sort of styling side of things. But then this is the world that really connected me. And the thing that connected was that I was no longer designing for myself. The thing with branding is you are always having to put yourself into the shoes of a consumer, and probably 99 times out of 100, they aren't you. They're somebody else who are designing for someone else. And it gives you kind of real purpose and real actual clarity of thought, I think, trying to think of meeting that consumer's need, connecting with them on all sorts of kind of different levels. So I kind of, I went from that kind of first agency, and then I moved down to London, where I work for a big company called Design Bridge, have kind of offices in kind of across the world, and then another company called Blue Marlin, which is where I met Nick, and then we eventually left to do our own thing. So what I've got here is I'm just going to take you through a little bit of kind of bringing you back to kind of what structural packaging is. So I think the first thing to kind of say is that structural packaging is every bit of every type of packaging that sort of isn't even like the bit that Susie and Claire kind of get involved in. So it could be something as tiny and inexpensive as a cellophane wrapper, right through to a hand-blown glass bottle for £1,000 whiskey brand, and everything in between. And I think the big thing about structural packaging is that perhaps unlike the graphic design side of things, there's a massive kind of challenge around the manufacturing and the costs associated with it. So when we pick up a kind of big structural packaging project, it's really meaty. It can last for a number of years. It goes from being highly creative into very sort of highly technical sort of back end delivery. And it's because of all the costs associated with it. So if we're redesigning that shower gel bottle that you were talking about, Tony, and making sure the hook works, there is going to be millions and millions of pounds worth of investment associated with it. Sadly, that's not going to us as Echo, all of that. It's mostly associated with changing the manufacturing and changing the filling lines that then that put the shower gel into that bottle. And it's an incredibly investment heavy experience. So these projects are very, very slow moving. They're very, very complex. There's a lot of people involved in them. And the design part of that is very much just the kind of tip of the iceberg in kind of getting things to market. So unfortunately, I would say probably 70% of the stuff that we work on and design in this space never even gets to market, never gets in front of a consumer, because there are just so many challenges that need to be kind of overcome. So just to explain a little bit of the role of structural packaging and kind of how we approach that, and it's very much kind of how we think about things. So there's a huge amount of kind of nuances and touch points to kind of the physical packaging that most of us don't think about in our day-to-day lives. You know, we go from, you know, getting up in the morning, you know, brushing our teeth, squeezing out the toothpaste, having a shower, shampoo, you know, grabbing that coffee on the way to work. We touch so much, so many brands, so much physical packaging, and all of those small interactions where the brand has an opportunity to go and build a relationship with you. And it's often when, if you like, the design hasn't been thought through and something doesn't work particularly well, it's really then that we often sort of notice it, and it kind of becomes sort of quite obvious. So we're always thinking about trying to build these kind of emotional connections, and this part of the presentation talks about all of those kind of assets that we've got to play with to kind of do that. So when we're talking to clients about structural packaging, it doesn't work quite the same as graphic design. Graphic design, in the hands of experts like Susie and Claire, is a very nuanced tool. You know, they've got words, they've got logos, they've got photography, illustration. Literally, we can print stuff that we want consumers to think and feel on the pack. It can be incredibly kind of detailed. Structural packaging is like walking into a museum and looking at a piece of sculpture. You immediately get a visceral reaction to it. So actually a lot of what we do is try and distill down these big brand manuals that our clients give it to us with all these big words in there, like it's contemporary or it's feminine, and we go, yeah, but what do you actually mean by that? So because it's not very nuanced and people get this instinctive reaction to that thing in the physical world, we try and find something very, very singular that we can kind of deliver. So the Rexona can, which is Sure in the UK, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, that can was all about delivering this idea of elegance, for example. So it's a very kind of singular idea sitting behind it, that Tynan bottle, with not one of ours, unfortunately, but it was that, you know, you come away with that, with this idea of kind of liquidity and movement in there. So they're very sort of singular pieces of design. And then on top of that, we've got all these other things that brands want to be. They want to be, you know, premium. They want to be disruptive. They want to communicate feminine, fresh, classic, heritage, all these other things. And that very much is the execution. That's how you deliver it. So a little bit to the conversation we were having about sketching and CAD and things, you know. Here, this is the sketch moment where we're having to think of that one singular amazing idea. This is that kind of CAD, the craft, that attention to detail that kind of Nick was alluding to earlier, where we kind of trying to build up all that layering. So, you know, what have we got in our toolbox to play with? What are all the things that we're kind of constantly trying to juggle? And it really is like trying to spin plates when you're doing this. So we've got form, obviously the physicality of something, you know, that one singular idea. We've got the function, you know, can we make people's lives easier, better, faster, more convenient? And then we've got all that kind of hidden stuff, that implied stuff, the feel of something. You know, we often talk about, you know, the sound an Audi car door makes when you shut it. You know, it sounds expensive. You know, does it sound more expensive than a Peugeot? And it's that kind of implied kind of quality that we're trying to build in for the brands we work on. So form, you know, that's probably the most iconic silhouette in the world. Probably you can go into the middle of the Amazon and show that to someone living there, and they will tell you that's Coca-Cola. That is an amazing example of brand equity, and pretty much all the advertising you see now uses that silhouette. They don't even need to put brand on it, and everyone knows, wow, what you know, every brand wants to be where Coca-Cola is. We've got things like format, and you can actually have loads of fun. You know, everyone expects washing up liquid to be in a clear plastic bottle with a squeezy top on it. Well, it doesn't have to be. You know, some of the most interesting, innovative brands there are borrowing codes, the kind of, you know, the visual language of a category, and turning it on its head. So Moschino, that is perfume in there, but we all think that's you know, detergent for cleaning your work surfaces. We can have a lot of fun subverting codes of different markets. Detailing, craft, you know, adding richness, you know, particularly in the world of spirits, for example. Those are things where you make you stand out, make you feel special, make you, you know, wow, they've hand braided this little thing on this Opir gin. Wow, they must spend a lot of time crafting the product if they spend that much time thinking about the craft of the actual packaging. So we think about all those little things that are almost subconscious that the consumer will pick up. Working, Claire, Susie, myself, we work really closely together. It's not about, hey, we've got 2D designers sitting over here and 3D designers sitting over there. We don't talk to each other. I have worked in agencies where they sit on different floors, and it's almost like they're not allowed to go up and down the stairs. But we try and do 1 + 1 = 3. Great graphic design working with great physical design can create really, really iconic assets and actually be greater than some of their parts. We talk about kind of creating focal points. You wouldn't believe the amount of research that goes into creating the packaging we all kind of see and buy on the supermarket. They do eye tracking where people wear digital helmets and go into stores, and they track where people's eyes look, and they can analyze our new proposed designs based on that. So we try and create kind of focal points on pack. We do that graphically, we do that physically, that draw people's eyes in. You have 3 seconds at shelf to capture someone's attention, particularly if you're new. That's an incredibly short amount of time to make that connection, else you just get bypassed. We try and capture a brand's ethos. Method's a great example of it's premium, it's stripped back, it's contemporary, and through a suite of products you can kind of deliver that kind of feel for a brand. The function bit's brilliant. This is all about trying to make things work better. It's ergonomics, it's anthropometrics, it's making things fit in the hand really, really well. This video unfortunately won't play on here, but haptics, the sound, that Audi card, or how do things sound? The brief when we designed this, and I'll talk about this pack in a little bit more detail in a second, was to create something that the young guys that buy Lynx, as it is in the UK, will kind of really connect to. And we tried to get that kind of fiddle factor, like a kind of Zippo lighter, that amazing kind of sound and addictive kind of ergonomic feel. And that's kind of why this closure got designed as it was. What would champagne be like without that ritual of breaking the foil, twisting off the cage, popping the hook? It would miss so much. So can we create kind of these emotional connections through the way you open something, the way you dispense it, the behavior, the interaction, and that's where you kind of create connections. Just wouldn't feel the same, would it, if you pop it out of a can, or I don't know, it's in a Tetra Pak like milk is. Just wouldn't have the same celebratory feel that we've all come accustomed to. Tactility, again, you can have a lot of fun with materials and how things go. This is an amazing mayonnaise pack from Japan, and it's a molded bottle, like a regular bottle, but they've very cleverly made it so it's rigid at the top where the closure goes on, and it's really floppy like a bag at the bottom, and it just sits there on the table, sort of bloop, and it embodies what mayonnaise is. It's for some reason, and it's just fantastic. And they've even thought about how it dispenses. So it doesn't just get blobbed out onto your plate. It's got this lovely, delightful, like sort of Mr. Whippy-esque little detail in the spout. So it comes out in a really fun way. Again, it's all about kind of those little things that they're not going to blow your mind. They're not going to kind of make you drive 400 miles to go and get one. But it's the sort of thing that puts a smile on your face and connects you to that brand. And then feel, and this is, Scott will talk loads more about this than I can. This is really his world. But we're always thinking about materials, particularly with sustainability kind of being top of mind. We're thinking, what does that material say? Plastics are considered to be sort of bad by pretty much everybody now. It's not always the case. But we're exploring experimental materials. This olive oil, it's using wood. It's saying something about the product. Maybe it's saying it's more natural. Maybe it's talking a bit about the origins of that product. And finishes, matte, gloss, things that you can pick up, embossings, they all add to that kind of quality feel of the product. And colour, but I will leave that one for Scott to talk a lot more about. And then doing things like just little subtle things, add kind of quality cues and sort of create connections with the product. So just to show you've all been paying attention. So all pretty I won't pick on anybody, but these are all pretty kind of iconic brands, but just through some of those physical assets, they have created kind of real kind of icons that are almost like universally recognized or stand out in their kind of chosen markets. I'll flip over the page, don't worry, I won't expect anyone to name them all. But, Tiffany & Co. own that color. Literally, you can print that on a bag, you can put it on a t-shirt, and it's Tiffany. Chanel No. 5, that silhouette is absolutely iconic. Johnny Walker, the way the label and the bottle work together, absolutely. Orangina, you could put that texture on the side of a van and you would still know it's kind of Orangina. Nespresso has created a structural icon with that little patented aluminium container there. And that's what kind of we and I am in the business of trying to do, creating sort of physical icons for brands that are as recognizable as the graphic work that the other guys in the team are kind of delivering. So very quickly, I've got two case studies. So this is a project we did quite a while ago now, but it was kind of super cool. And this one's very sort of creative, visual led. So Lynx is in the UK. Shout out Joel Brand, I'm sure partners, yourself, dads, brothers, you've probably got one of these packs kind of in your shower somewhere, or you've seen it before. And they kind of came to us and said, time has moved on. We need to refresh. This was designed when guys are playing computer games on their PC with giant kind of fighter plane joystick things, and it all felt a little bit analog in the digital age. And they needed to kind of refresh and update. So one of the big things we create are mood boards. Susie and Claire create lots of them. I create a lot of them, and they are a really amazing tool to bridge all those words that we get from our clients. And before we start kind of putting pen to paper, and we call these brand manifestation boards, and they are designed to absolutely capture what we are trying to physically and visually deliver for a brand. And sitting at the heart of Lynx Axe is this idea of primal playful. So it's primal in that it's your kind of, as a young guy, it's your first kind of maybe personal care product. It's kind of got that dark, mysterious kind of edge to it. But on its own, that would be a bit sinister. So it's got this very sort of playful, tongue-in-cheek side to it as well. And what we were trying to do was balance that and deliver something that would encapsulate that. So this was the pack we developed. And we wanted something that we weren't sure whether it had been beamed down from outer space or it had been found buried in the earth after 5,000 years. So it's kind of got this very sort of primal quality to it. But what we did is with the graphic side of it, we created this, it's called the exoskeleton, that piece with the Axe brand on it, where all of the variant flavors and the dynamism could play. So the physical is doing this kind of primal masculine kind of thing. And then the identity is doing that playful bit. And as I said before, it's those two things working really strongly together that is absolutely kind of delivers on the brief. Just to talk a little bit about our process. We do sketches. That's how we kind of start everything. And as Nick was saying, we just develop them enough to kind of sort through them and get a set of work that we want to present to the client. Now, on the CAD side of things, what normally we find is that clients are about as visually literate as a frog. They really struggle with sketches. They can't visualize what it's going to be. As creatives, Susie can do that sketch on a post-it and I'll go, I love it, Susie, that's bloody brilliant. Yeah, let's do that. Show that to a client, they'll go, yeah, I don't get it. I don't know what it's going to look like on shelf. So that's when we have to get into the CAD side. That's when we have to go and make models. As Nick was saying, we've got 3D printer, we've got CNC lathe, and sometimes I even go in the workshop and get my hand tools out and make stuff by hand. And that's where that side of it comes in. And that side of it really comes in as well as you go through the development process, because you get things like manufacturers involved. You get tool makers who are going to make the molds from which it's going to be made. And you get the bean counters coming in going, well, we have to make this for 0.4 cents. So you need that precision, you need that detail at that stage to be able to actually start to do analysis. And the amount of analysis that goes into a piece of structural packaging, tip angles so it doesn't fall over on the line, stability, touch points so it runs on a line with 4 million other packs and doesn't fall over. It's got to be on volume because you've got to put 300 milliliters of shower gel in it. It's a huge raft of kind of technical stuff, and that's very much where all of that physical kind of model making, prototypes, CAD really comes in. And there's lots of different bits of software to allow us to do that. And then that was the kind of complete, and like many of the brands we work on, there are literally hundreds of products, SKUs, flavors, whatever you want to call them, that we kind of develop as part of a program like this. And then very quickly, just to finish off, just to put something totally at the other end of the spectrum. So this is a project we did a few years ago for Cow and Gate, which who make infant formula milk, so powdered milk for babies. And this was the pack they'd launched, and their sales were basically dropping off a cliff. So someone basically got rid of the tin that was really, really good and mum and dads liked, and they bought a vacuum coffee bag line. And what you can kind of see immediately in this photograph, that beautiful pristine pouch there isn't pristine literally 2 seconds after you've opened it the first time, and it's a usability nightmare. You get milk all over your counter. Imagine you've got hold a baby at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's crying, you're trying to feed it, you're trying to make up the formula, you're trying to boil stuff in pans, and this is the packaging they've given mums and dads. No wonder their sales are kind of falling off a cliff. So like a lot of our projects we do kind of collaborative working. So we did a workshop with mums and dads, and we tried to sort of basically tap into their understanding, tap into their challenges, tap into their needs and desires and wants, and develop kind of new thoughts, new thinking to see how we can help solve their problem. We worked with an ergonomist on this project as well. So we created hypotheses, designs, and prototypes, and then we tested them using an ergonomist, and we were actually able to prove that they worked better. It wasn't a subjective bunch of consumers sitting around chatting. We actually did kind of scientific tests with this. And what we were able to do with this new pack, which I'll show you in a second, was we were able to build in our singular idea that we were trying to build in through this packaging was this idea of care. So if they care this much about the packaging and trying to make our lives easier and better and simpler and less hassle, my God, the product must be fantastic. So it was lots of little things, and that often our job is lots of little things. So we put a clip in the lid of the pack. So the scoop wasn't in the powder, it was in the lid, nice and clean. You're not having to rummage around and try and find it, which is horrible. It's got a really, really positive reseal. It's that Audi car door thing. It feels like it's safe. Nothing's going to get in there and affect the product. We had little lips on the top of the packaging, so you could stack them. Mum and dad don't want to run out of this stuff, so they're going to have loads of it in the cupboard. Also works really well in supply chain, so it's easy to transport. And then we put a scraper bar on the inside, so you can level the scoop and get an accurate dose. Your 3-month-old baby is the most precious thing in your life. You don't want to be under or overfeeding it. So you're not having to rummage around the drawer to find something to level off your scoop at 4 o'clock in the morning. You've got it designed in. All these little details. And the thing we always try and find out is what effect does our design have? It's very hard to separate the kind of advertising and marketing of a new product from the actual design packaging. But this had no marketing when it was relaunched, and sales went up by 16%. And that's really, really important to us, that we can demonstrate and show that the designs we do actually have benefit for the brands. And I think, there we go. So any questions from anyone?
Could I ask a question there? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, far away.
Hi there. Absolutely brilliant. How is the whole thing with copyright and you come up with great ideas and then you see somebody else stealing your ideas? Do you go after them, or do you?
No. Well, I think so. First, personally, I think I in our world, ideas are cheap. That's our currency. So personally, I don't get particularly defensive or feel any sort of great kind of ownership. And I think on the sort of legal side of it, there's two separate things. There's IP, which is kind of patentable. So I've come up with an espresso thing, and I can register that, and it's got a patent, and I'm protected. But then there's design registration, where it's not technically patentable, but it's you're patenting, it's not patenting, you're registering a visual look, which could be a logo, it could be a physical thing. And that's very, very hard to protect, actually, because you only have to change it by like 5% and you can kind of get around it. So to be honest, but I think that the big insurance we have is that, in theory, if I designed that pack for Axe links, it's only applicable for Axe links. It won't work for Radox. It won't work for, I don't know, Dove or another brand. It's because everything we do is so brand centric. It's absolutely designed to communicate what that brand stands for and no one else. And to be honest, if Tesco or Asda want to go and rip off the Axe pack for their young guys shower gel, that's fine. I just take that as a very flattering compliment.
There was a very interesting one. Do you know Brewdog, the beer company? I can't remember which retailer it was, but they copied their design on shelf, so they own label one. It was like an Asda one, so they had their version of Brewdog. So then Brewdog brought out their copy of an Asda one to sort of take the mickey out of them. It was look at it online. It's a really clever bit of response to that. But that's a common thing is the retailers with their own label things will try and bring their designs as close in as the individual brands so that they can get a bit of the halo effect of it. But they often, they just look like cheap versions.
Thank you very much.
I'll just throw in, I just love the idea of storytelling through this whole thing. This is just, I go to the Isle of Wight quite a lot. I've got a little place over there, and I went into Mermaid Gin, and they were showing the bottle that they used to sell the Mermaid in, which was a little dumpy gin bottle, and it was going nowhere. It wasn't going off the shelves at all. And they put it in the new bottle, which is all scaled down the outside. It's a thing of beauty. They sell on eBay empty, which is
wow.
Which is mad. And they just walked off the shelf. They completely walked off the shelf. And it's just the packaging, everything else tells a whole story. And then the whole environmental, sustainable side of it is you can't have anything that's unsustainable because you don't want to hurt mermaids. And it's that whole story.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds great.
That's branding for you.
And I think that's a great example of, gin is just a category that has exploded in the last, 5-10 years. And I think it's that sort of thing that you have to do. It's like the bar is raised across the board, and there is now so many like craft gins. We're working on a kind of mainstream gin at the moment, and it's really struggling to get noticed. And you do have to go to some extreme kind of lengths to embody your brand and kind of create that impact at a shelf.
Any other questions?
I might just ask one, Andrew, about your use of focus groups. We've tried to bring them in and try and simulate them in classes a little bit, but a lot of the time they're pretty subjective because it's their friends that are part of their focus group. So we're trying to seek other students, even staff. Would you have used focus groups extensively with the two marketing campaigns or the two design campaigns, sorry, that you showed us there? And I mean, how impactful are they in, maybe making those last little refinements to make sure that it's meeting the needs of the future consumers you're bringing them to market?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. Pretty much everything we do gets tested in some form. Normally on a big project for someone like Unilever, they'll do two forms of research. They'll do qualitative research, and then which will be people in a room sort of picking apart your designs, and that's probably when you've got 3 or 4 different concepts on the table that have been taken far enough to be able to show consumers, so they look pretty finished, pretty polished. And then they'll do quantitative research when generally there's only one design that's kind of been signed off internally. And then that's volume, that will be probably done online. Research is a bit of a double-edged sword. It's like the Unilevers of the world need it because nobody there wants to put their kind of careers on the line and go, hey, let's relaunch Dove, and we've made it, red, and got rid of the Dove logo, and we've changed the font. They don't want to, nobody's going to sign up to do that. But the trouble with consumers is they don't typically know what they want until you give it to them. Some of the most interesting, well-loved brands and packaging are almost there despite research, and probably if they'd been researched in the way that is done today, they wouldn't have made it onto the shelf. So I think there's a lot of changes happening in how people are using research. They're using it as a check, a sort of a gross negative, rather than to sort of lead the design. It's just the old thing, isn't it? If you ask a consumer, what do they need, they'll go, well, exactly what I've got today. It's only when you kind of launch something new, they go, oh, actually, that's way better than the last one. As a species, we're incredibly good at adapting to bad design, and it's only when you actually put some great design in front of someone and they realize how poor what they've had to date has been.
I think also the questions that you ask during research are so important as well, because I think a lot of times sometimes people struggle to articulate exactly what they're feeling and thinking, because as Andy had been saying, your reaction to a design is so intrinsic to how it looks that you sometimes don't know how to interpret that connection to it or that emotion. So really trying to hone down onto why they like something or why they don't like something is a sort of whole other skill in itself.
I mean, we often talk about this idea of designing in the shoes of the user. It's very easy as a designer to design for yourself, because you can make all the decisions of something you'd like or fits your hand or whatever. And one of the things that, for example, that we're very keen to do is think about inclusive design. Designing for all people, so whether you've got disabilities or maybe sight problems. We think our aging population now has dexterity problems, strength problems, cognitive problems, sight problems, and so if we're designing packaging, and we're designing if you're a young designer designing it for, you're not thinking about that. So using research, user observation, research, consumer groups, focus groups, so on, just gets your mind out of your own space and into their world, and you start to understand what their needs are. So it's an important tool that we use in lots of different ways, and the storytelling is really important as well, because we can create personas, we can create sort of people that we design for. They're sort of pretend people, but we sort of target those people. So we design toys for Nestle, and we're doing exactly that. We've got 3 different types of child that we can think, create a dreamer, and we design toys, constructive toys for them, sort of learning toys that are focused in for those different children and what they're interested in.
Just to build on that, Nick, it's not about research, but what you said about putting yourself into other people's shoes is really important. Something I learned only at uni, but very early on at uni, and an exercise we did was to create a character exactly like Nick was saying. We actually physically we got given loads of cardboard, and we didn't know what the exercise was, but they were like, build a head. And so we built this head, and then it was like, well, who is it? What do they do? How old are they? What's their career? What's their background? And then we had to design a product for them, for that character that we'd built. And maybe, getting students to almost become someone else when they're critiquing each other's work could be quite helpful, thinking about like the brief that's been set or the project that they're doing.
It's something called archetypes. So if you search on the internet, you'll find them. They're different sort of character types. And they're quite useful because they sort of help you think about different sorts of people and the way they might respond to something. A brand itself could be an archetype if it had a personality, but equally you can use those archetypes to actually think about who you're actually targeting in terms of your design, the type of things that they would like or not like, and how they would interact with it.
I think that's the other reason why I love design, is that breadth of projects we work on and the people that we interact with. And it's, I think if designers created a pub quiz team, we'd be winning at everything because of the sort of different knowledge that we gain along the way about the clients that we work with. I think, yeah, it's fascinating to work on so many different types of things and learn so much about different areas.
You have to become an expert and almost fall in love with every product that you do. Yeah, you just learn so much along the way.
Even if it's incontinence pants.
Even if it's incontinence.
Yeah, this is a little bit random, but just to throw something into the mix there, we've got a generation of people that now using mobile phones. Mobile phones have got a lot smaller, but then when you think about your thumbs, repetitive strain injury, but also like dexterity of when you are using your mobile and touch screens, like that's something that I do think about, especially when I think about my parents using a mobile and how they interact with it.
What do you think? One of the things that we want to see if we can change is think about pill packs. So the pill pack was designed back in the 60s. It became popular because of the pill and the contraceptive pill, and it's a brilliant piece of packaging in some ways because it keeps the product integrity to 100%, and that's really important with drugs, that they work. And they keep them all separate, so you should think they're organizable. But you give an old person a pill pack and they've got to get the pills out. They can't get the pills out. They're not strong enough. They haven't got the dexterity. Yet it's actually older people that are taking more. They'll take a cocktail of pills. My father's in his 90s and he's having to open all these packs. It's terrible, absolutely terrible. So it sort of fits one thing, but it doesn't do something else. And I think as we go on, we need to start thinking of new solutions. And that's a designer's job, is to kind of go. They're all going. Oh, and it's also really bad for the environment because they can't be recycled. They're small, so they get lost. So, there's lots of them. So how do we replace it? And it might not even be packaging. It might be a device now that delivers them, a cartridge that comes to your home that you then send back. So there's some really exciting things sort of around the corner for designers to start working on.
Yeah, I have a couple of students thinking along those lines too, but then you've got the intersection between something like programming a device to dispense pills and then older people who will not want to use a device like that. So there's so many different things, but no, that was brilliant. Thanks very much.
It's a big differentiator, I think, between us and art and design is that empathy. In art, you're making it for yourself, and if other people like it, that's great. If they don't like it, that's probably great as well. But with design, you've got to get inside somebody else's head, which is a really difficult thing to ask a 15, 16, 17-year-old to do.
You should cross over the drama class.
Fantastic. Well, shall we do another 10-minute break, stretch the legs, and regroup at 5:10 to hear from Scott?
Great.
See you in 10. Perfect. Let's end on some wise words from Scott on production.
Thanks for being so patient, everyone. I'll just share my screen.
And while Scott gets that loaded, we just want to share that the Echo team are just as intrigued to hear this presentation, because what Scott does is a bit of in my eyes, the sort of hidden arts in our studio, and how he makes, what were we saying? Actually, John walked past his desk yesterday and said, he's like a magician. He makes the designer's wildest dreams actually come true in reality, and understands the intricacies of printing technology.
Right. I'll just share my screen.
No pressure after that build up, Scott.
Yeah. Right. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So, a lot of people kind of forget that in design agencies, there's more stages after design that actually happens. And this is sort of what I specialize in, which is the realization and production, which essentially is the pathway, I guess, in preparing the design concept to market. So essentially, you're kind of translating the concept into the real world and ensuring that what has been designed has been reproduced in marketplace as best as it possibly can be. So it's a bit of a dark art. So a lot of people, like Tashi touched on, a lot of people in design actually don't quite understand what we do in production. So yeah, here we go. I translate concepts into objects with it, but it's a very nuanced sort of vocation where there's a lot of different roles within production in the design industry. So we have what we call art workers, which technically prepare design files to hand over the reproduction process. And I'll just clarify that after the design process, you have the production process where we prepare files to go to the reprographics agencies who then prepare them for the printing presses, which obviously from then on goes into market. So we do that translation. So within that, you've got artworking, you've also got visualization, which are essentially a little bit more like people who are able to sort of visualize concepts into a more of a final representation of a product. You know, it's kind of similar to doing sort of 3D CAD work and stuff like that, but also on an illustrative scale. And then you have people who do retouching, who manipulate imagery, basically Photoshop and in preparation for the artwork process as well. So it also can be a purely technical career, which I actually, to be honest with you, don't know a lot about it because I've always been steered in sort of one direction, but the more reprographic technical production side, I guess, could be viewed almost as a sort of apprenticeship in a way where you are more taught technical skill rather than the creative side of things. So there's that branch off too, which I won't go into in any great depth because I can only really talk about my experiences in this industry. Like me, there are people in production with a creative background who combine it with their technical know-how as well, so which basically quantifies production in design. So I ensure the final result is the best interpretation of design and client expectation whenever I'm handling any design. I manage that process by delivering realistic limitation, alternative suggestions and enhancements within the print industry. I balance technical design experience and streamline the relationship between the client, design and production. And I also followed print innovation and encouraged sustainable practices in the design world and also in production and manufacturing. So how did I get here? You don't worry about the first line. I'm from New Zealand. At high school, I was really good at English, art history, classics, and sort of like Andy, I enjoyed all the creative and practical electives. I was pretty terrible at maths and economics and applied sciences and things. They were purely the kind of subjects that I thought of as a student as allowing me to get marks to keep on doing art and the things above. I loved art, particularly painting and drawing. My teachers were very inspirational and encouraging. They were artists in their own right. They were very nurturing about sort of how enthusiastic we were about it. So yeah, and in the final year of high school, the national curriculum in New Zealand is probably a bit different over here, but we were finally offered an elective as graphic design to get into university. I was really excited about it. Obviously, I was ecstatic I didn't have to do calculus as a subject anymore, and I could substitute that with another creative subject. And then through being offered that design course in my last year at high school or college, I sort of began to understand how visual communication and design and graphics shape so much of our daily life. So I went to Victoria University in Wellington. 5 years later, I ended up with a Bachelor of Design and Visual Communications. I loved typography, photography, and sort of postmodern design. Unfortunately, the weird thing was you go to design school and they didn't really have a grasp on sort of the commercial world. And to be honest, when you're at design school, you don't really want to think about the commercial world because you're so stoked with doing pretty stuff all day. So we left as more graphic artists and sort of a commercial designer. So there was a very, very steep learning curve when we finally got our first jobs. And not to mention, internships weren't really a thing back in the day in New Zealand. So you basically just struck out for a job. Yeah, and my first note to self was the idea of being paid to design. You had to deal with the idea that time equals money. So you had to up your game quite a lot. Time frames were obviously not half a year to do a nice logo. It was half a week. So things changed pretty quickly for me. So I got my first job at a small agency in Wellington. There's a lot of bread and butter work, which is pretty prevalent in most of the design industry, where obviously there's a lot of clients that you sort of carry on with, and then everyone looks forward to those fun little niche design jobs, you know, like the organic ice cream tubs down in Brighton, or, you know, something like that, as opposed to these large monolithic type brand jobs. But fortuitously, there was a printing press in the basement of this design firm. So I used to hang out down there quite a lot, and starting to understand how the printing press actually works, I realized that through my studies at university and subsequently coming to work, there was a bit of a disconnect between how design was actually translated onto the press. So surely understanding the process of how to print something is a good thing in the design world, because at the end of the day, printing's been around for a couple of 100 years or so, and you're essentially just putting something onto something. And that hasn't changed at all. You're just transferring an image onto something physical. And it has, I guess it has changed a little bit with digital, but we can talk about that later. But understanding the process in which to translate that design file or that design image within the limitations of manufacturing and getting it onto that thing you wanted it on, surely must make it advantageous when you're thinking about your design work as to how it's actually going to come out at the end of the day. So I did find I started to look at everything in the design, and I used to wonder, how did this happen? How did we get it like this? How did this work? What was the process in order to get it onto that sheet of paper or onto that cardboard box or onto the side of that building or whatever? And does it communicate the same idea that the designer intended when it was signed off? So obviously my career path then became a real mix of design and interpretation. So after that initial first introduction job, I ended up setting up a design studio in a corrugated cardboard factory in New Zealand, which is a bit of an odd one, because it was a cardboard company that made corrugated cardboard on site. They printed sort of wine boxes mainly, meat packing, export cases, shipping cases for around the world. And it's a very, very basic print process. But at the same time, and you know, they're working on machines that are at least 50 years old as well. But at the same time, it's very nuanced in what you can actually put on corrugated cardboard. So I ended up being on the factory floor quite a lot and sort of understanding how my design would translate onto film, which I had to make, which was then translated onto large rubber plates, which wrapped around the printing machine, and then how they were printed, and then what the guys who were printing, what they dealt with in terms of that translation. So I did that for a few years, and I actually really enjoyed it, but it was a bit weird in the sense that you were sort of factory-based in a way. So I ended up moving to Australia, and I ended up getting a job in design implementation for, I don't know if anyone's heard of Coles Myer in Australia. They're sort of, I guess, the equivalent of Sainsbury's over here. And I worked in-house there for their design team, and I was in charge of sort of implementing design, which is essentially the idea is a design for something has been done, and as an implementation project, say it's like saying you have a can of tomato soup, there's every other type of soup. You only use the can of tomato soup, and through that interpretation, you design every other flavor after that. So it kind of gave me a big grounding in the importance of sort of brand strategy and you know, the use of color, texture, finishes, and uniformity in brands. And at that time, we were working on, you've always had home brands in the UK, and it's sort of nothing new, but in Australia at the time, the idea of a home brand, and particularly in a supermarket, was sort of a little bit foreign and associated with sort of really poor quality and quite cheap things. So we were trying to establish a home brand for Coles, coincidentally called You'll Love Coles, which sort of elevated the idea of a home brand into the market, much the way you see it in Marks and Spencer and things like that these days. So I did that for a while. Ended up working for another Melbourne agency that was quite successful in packaging design, sort of in the artwork side of things again. And from there, I ended up moving to London and setting up the artwork department for their new satellite office over here. So I spent a while doing that. And then I was 5 years there, and then I ended up doing another 5 years of sort of freelancing around different agencies in London, doing retouching artwork and production work as well. And sort of this is the kind of work that I'd been exposed to. So in all those years, I dealt with many, many different types of materials, many different ideas of print process due to all these different materials. The idea of sort of print strategy and brand strategy, I guess you can see it right there with your Heinz tomato soup. You've got the red can, you've got the very similar sort of soup bowl motifs going through all the range, different colors with variants, you know, but it's still recognizably part of an entire family. Same as Tango, obviously. I don't know if you know Robinson's. Amoy, obviously, with their black. And then also sort of dealing with a lot of sort of beverage and sort of little niche things like sort of the lick frozen yogurt there, and then the very, very high-end stuff like Cavassier, which you're dealing with a lot of different materials and print processes and finishings, very niche markets. And I guess you've probably heard of Aquafresh as well. And I ended up at Echo. I've got a very varied job from day to day. Like I said, production work sort of straddles a whole lot of different disciplines. So, you know, one day I might take design files and translate them to a format that ensures the designer client services client and the manufacturer have a clear understanding of what the expected outcome is. So here we've seen the English tea shop already. We can already see in this sort of layout sort of the idea of brand strategy and uniformity. But my part of the process here is then to take what they call the design, lay it over what they call the cutter guide, which is the shape in which the box will be cut out from, apply all the legal specifications. The font sizes have to be certain sizes, barcodes have to be positioned in certain areas, what kind of relevant sustainability logos or anything have to be shown. On top of that, specify the print strategy, which is dealing with sort of how many colors is this going to be printed out on, how many colors is the subsequent variants after this going to be printed out on. For the entire range, there's going to be a whole new brand strategy. There may be limitations in print as to how many colors are available, so you have to sort of apply the entire family to that. What kind of finishes and varnishes, what kind of embossing or textures are going to be applied. And then you sort of have to lay these out sort of, I guess, in the clearest form possible, annotated like this, to tell the manufacturers and the reprographics organizations exactly what you're expecting from the artwork that you give them. And I mean, Susie mentioned as well, we dealt with illustrators doing those beautiful mandala shapes. Also, you know, I sort of had a little bit of input into how I wanted the mandalas to be provided to me in order for me to translate and keep that beauty and clarity and color to fit within the print processes, to be consistent within the brand, to encompass all the different mandalas that were made. So you can imagine there's a lot of sort of forward thinking in terms of, well, you essentially are just looking at something in your hand and working backwards from it and figuring out how it's going to happen. I may manipulate imagery on a day to represent an ideal or an idea. For instance, this is another client of ours, Craig and Rose, for their sort of lookbooks where, you know, they have set photographs and they need things cleaned up. They want to represent an ideal for their product. For instance, you know, there's a lot of mold on the shed in the back of the window. Clear that up. It's a bit unsightly. Oh, we want the door closed at the back. Make sure it's closed. Oh, can you get rid of those horrible light cords that are hanging down? We don't need that. Make it more clean. Make it a more ideal home. You know, this kind of idea of sort of creating a new reality or a better reality in that sense. You know, as well down here, sort of at the bottom one, get rid of some unsightly cracks on the wall, you know, extend the flooring out the back, make a more sort of through transition into what we're trying to illustrate with all our different colors here. You know, people could be say, change the color of the wall. We don't like the rug there, put another pattern on the rug. You know, all these kind of technical skills are sort of involved in terms of creating all these sort of different senses of reality and presentation. Sometimes on the more fun side of this kind of presentation of a new reality, you might be asked to sort of create new visuals, key visuals for certain brands where are a combination of a whole lot of different photographs and ideas into something. So you're creating something from a whole different form of things, which is quite an art in itself. And I guess this comes into the visualization and retouching side of things as well. I may be on site at a print manufacturer with the client, proofing actual physical products for sign-off. When you find there's a proofing process that goes on after you lay out a design to go off to print. Obviously, you need to ensure that the colors are being printed how you want. The information is legible. There's a consistency again in the brand that are being printed. So you also have to have quite a deep knowledge of how things are printed and what you can do to them to ensure a sort of brand consistency. So you're sort of dipping your toes into a very, very technical world. And I guess this is where it kind of satisfied me quite a lot, as well as design, where I always used to want to know how things worked. And sort of, as much as I enjoyed the creative side of things, I always had this sort of slightly technical sort of idea in the back of my head that interests me. Yeah, so for the past 20 years, I've been exposed to many different print techniques and technologies in the packaging industry. And while keeping one foot in design, I've ended up with a pretty unique career that's built on understanding and communicating with most facets of the design process. Obviously, there are aspects of design production that can be very specialized, standalone, and if non-creative careers, which is sort of the back end, the more non-creative of the translation directly onto press. But what I did find in the UK is maybe it's just plethora of different agencies over here, whereas in the New Zealand and Australian market was always quite small, that you do have the ability to specialize here, particularly if you have one particularly interested in just sort of creating 3D graphics, or if you have one particularly interest in just retouching photography, or you just want to lay out design on cutter guides, or deal with typographics. That is possible over here because of the volume of different agencies dealing with all these different vocations. But at the end of the day, my introduction is totally attributed to that high school project. Had I not had that, I don't know where I quite would be now, because obviously all I could think about was art back then. And then this design idea came into my world, and I realized how much that it affected everything. And it also acted as a artwork, sort of fine art creative outlet as well. And so delivering good design, understanding how to do it has always been the focus of my somewhat convoluted career path. Yeah, that's about it. Any questions?
I think you made a really good point, Scott, about sort of taking steps backwards in the design process to figure out where you start. And you know, it's not a case of design just sort of does their thing and then we just hand it to Scott one day and say, here you go. It's, you know, the sooner that we start talking to Scott in the design process, the more we'll understand what the limitations are. But also, you know, Scott comes up with ideas about, oh, you know, if you want to do X, Y, Z, if you thought about doing this as, you know, a way of making it even better. So it's very much part of the design process as well. And yeah, the earlier that we can sort of start understanding how something's going to be produced, the better we can make the outcome.
Yeah, it's very easy, and I have come across people in sort of the production industry who are a little bit computer says no orientated, and they will just say, no, I can't, no, we can't do, no, it's not physically possible, no, there's no machine in the world that can print this for you. And I guess that's what I found so intriguing and fascinating about sort of the idea of creative production, was having that sort of foundation and design work. I could say, well, you know, that's not that easy to do, but how about we do this? I can still maintain the integrity of your idea, but we're just going to have to translate it in a slightly different way, but you're still going to essentially have the same results. So I guess in a sense, working with what you got, but understanding the best way to work with it.
I suppose that highlights one of the big things about design, is that you very seldom have a designer on their own, one individual. You know, a designer goes, it's not your design really, it's a group of lots of people get involved and lots of people contribute towards it. It's, you know, 99.99% of the time it's a team effort, which is great because it's a collaborative process. It's exciting. We learn off each other, we spark ideas off each other, and it brings us together close as a team as well. I think, and it's exciting when you get a big launch out there that lots of people have been involved in, and everyone says, well, I helped sort of steer that in a certain direction using your own different skill sets to do it.
It's, I was talking to a designer this morning. He was talking about a design course at Bristol University. And he said that they've broken it down to 3 questions. Talk us through your portfolio, number 1. Number 2, what are you most proud of and why that you've designed so far? And then number 3, tell us about some team project that you were involved in. And he was saying that the one that all the kids slip up on at the moment is the team projects, because education at the moment is a very, very solo journey, can be. And they just don't have that experience of working in teams enough at school.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because when you're at school, you want to have stuff that you've learned is, and if you're doing it with others, and they can bring your project down, or you can, it can go well, but it's not absolutely up to you. It's got other people involved. But teamwork is such an essential part of working life, that to learn how to do that, to get through, part of design is negotiation. It's figuring ways around things, getting consensus, getting agreement across. I mean, one of the things that we do a lot of is running workshops, bringing lots of different people together from different walks of life. Scott's talking about the sort of end game from our bit of the business, but then if we go into industry, other people involved in the design process are tool makers, and as you said, the print people, there's the supply chain people, there's the guy that does the cost spreadsheets for bill of materials. There's like all these different people, and they've all got a point of view. And it's our job to kind of bring all those different points of view together and actually come to a consensus, an optimal design at the end of the day. So it's an incredibly collaborative process.
It comes over today. I mean, each one of you that's spoken has got your own specialism and your own niche area, but the overlap between you all has just come over in the talks, that one can't do it without the other person, the other people blending in with it, which is really good to hear, actually.
Yeah, it's sort of the way I think you sort of say is your skill set is not ring fenced. You have a core, which is your core skill, and then around that your skills blur, and that's good because that helps the collaboration and helps the communication and understanding. But everyone in the company has a core skill, which is unique to them. You know, and that's interesting in itself. Even if you got several people with the same job title, their experiences and so on is different. So they're better at some things than others. You know, just because of that skill set.
Before we close, can we just open it up? Has there anybody got any questions that they want to ask before we call it to a close?
I was going to ask, was it useful? Was it helpful to you? That's good.
It's been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it has been great. Thank you very, very much.
Can I ask, is there anything we'd love to know? We want to make it, you know, hopefully we'll do this again and want to make it better. So be very interested to know any bills, any things that you'd like to hear more about, or things less about, or things that we're missing. Please do let us know, because that will help us get better and better at it.
Thank you very much. That was really great. Like I the post, there's lots of takeaways from my head of department. So yeah, really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
I'll just do a quick sum up. I'm aware that we're Friday afternoon and pushing in towards evening, so I'm going to be very quick, I promise you. Just want to pick up on a few reasons why we do these events, and then I want to do a few thank yous as well at the end of it. I mean, I think we're all aware that we are looking beyond the examinations. The examinations are a comma, not a full stop, and we're trying increasingly at the association to look at that journey that students are taking from Key Stage 3 through Key Stage 4, 5, and then on to university and beyond, and trying to link it with industry, which is the whole thing that Blueprint is trying to do. And just looking at those skill sets that students need in order to confidently take their place thereafter. So hopefully this has ticked some of those boxes. We've talked about an awful lot of skill sets this afternoon. Also, there are so many jobs emerging that you know, your best careers advisor in any school is not going to know about half of them. And I think, you know, I've been aspects of the design process this afternoon that I didn't know about, and I'm involved in it almost on a daily basis. So hopefully that that will bring stuff to just information that when we're conversations with students, that it will help. And it's as important as I mean, we've got a mixture of the knowledge, yes, absolutely, which the government's obsessed with. We've then got skills, which the government's less obsessed with. And then there's those personal attributes or character sets that we're trying to build, you know, team building, durability, the ability to keep hitting the same problem in different ways and find your way around it rather than just hitting a wall over and over again. Hopefully, and I don't know, we'll get this in the feedback, but hopefully what it's also brought to you is validation that what you're doing in school is actually the right thing. Because what you're hearing, I hope, is that the skill sets that you're teaching on a daily basis is what's needed in industry. It's what's needed out there in the real world. So I know that's come from teachers in residence evaluations before, is that people have said they felt validated at the end of it. They went into it thinking, am I just teaching for an exam? And they came out of it thinking, actually, yeah, I'm actually teaching for far more than an exam, and it's much bigger than that. And hopefully as well, it will answer that question that we set up at the start, which is, you know, if a student does talk to you and say, what's it like in a design studio? Can you tell me? You haven't been in there, I know that, and the ideal is that you're actually in the studio. But we've got a really good feel, hopefully this evening, for all aspects of the work that goes on there. And that will help you to answer more confidently and to inform students more confidently. Few thank yous. I really want to thank everyone from Echo. I mean, so many of you came in, which surprised me, to be honest. There's so many of you came in, and it was fantastic that, you know, those journeys and those different skill sets that you all brought to it. It's just fantastic, and the amount of time that you've put into those presentations as well. just want to let you know that from our perspective, we really do appreciate that, and it's really been helpful. Also want to thank Amy, Nisha, Debbie, and everybody at the association, because these things don't happen by accident. You know, the whole getting everything together and getting everybody signed up, and I must admit, we've been a little bit selective with the crowd that we've pulled in this evening. We've pulled in teachers that we know will go back to school and use this, but we want to do more of these, and I've just done a back of a fag packet calculation here. There's about 2,000 kids that are going to be impacted by this session this evening. So 2,000 students between you are going to hopefully get some sort of positive feedback from this session, and that makes it all worthwhile. And last but not least, just thank you as well, all the teachers that are in on here today. I mean, these things, we get these ideas in the association, like, wouldn't it be great if, and you never know whether anyone's going to turn up. You never know whether anyone's going to come and find it useful. We will send out, we'll give it a few days just to let it bed in a little bit, and then we will send out a Survey Monkey. This is the first one we've done like this, so as much feedback as you can give us will be great, because our aim is we're building our Blueprint membership up, and we want to do more of these so as we can bring more and more experiences to students in schools and to teachers. So the more feedback you can give us, the better it'll be next time we do it. But thank you to everyone. It's been great. I feel like I've learned a lot, and yeah, I've drunk too much coffee. I'm going to be buzzing now for about 3 hours, but it's been fantastic. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening. Have a good half term.
Cheers. Have a great
Cheers.
weekend.
Bye, thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much. Bye.
Bye, thank you.